The story begins in a world invaded by demons. Because of these demons, people were scared, screaming while running in fear, trying to get away from the demons and survive. Unfortunately, there were also people who didn't have any capability of running away as they were caught on guard by a demon. But luckily, someone saved them by eliminating the demon who dared to attack them. The one who saved their lives is using a huge sword. Blood dripped from the sword after killing one of the demons. The mother and child were speechless, but deep down inside of them, they were grateful. The one who helped them is one of the great heroes. This hero said that demons are so annoying, and he proclaimed that not a single one of these demons would be spared. "They're coming. Everyone, get ready," he said with a slight smile on his face despite the situation. He is Haiban, a swordmaster. There were other heroes together with him willing to fight and wipe out the demons. Their plan is to let the archmage handle the aerial attacks, while Haiban and Lapinia, the lady swordmaster, would take care of the ground forces. King Power, Voltas, also volunteered to take care of all of the demons. A warrior with them also decided to infiltrate the demon castle and negotiate a surrender. Their goal is to defeat the demon king. Haiban turned his head around, telling the chief of security and their team that he was counting on him to quietly support the heroes from behind. A person who silently helps heroes behind the scenes is the Imperial Chief of Security, the main character of the story. This man has no talent and he was aware of it, which is why the other heroes only want him to be at the back. He has lived his whole life wielding a sword and trained with a sword his entire life. The peak he could never reach, the pinnacle of the sword, Swordmaster. The duty of heroes is to protect the world by defeating the Demon King, while he, on the other hand, is to protect the Imperial Castle. He was so down that he only needed to do nothing. He then told Haiban to go and fight with the demons without any worry. Haiban then smiled at him and he also smiled back. Haiban then runs away, charging at the monster while inviting RMC to have a drink together after this work. Demons roared upon seeing the heroes make a move. Lapinia was calm, swinging her sword to the demons and eliminating numerous of them without any hesitation. Voltas then appeared behind her and charged at the demons with a clenched fist. He strongly punched the ground, making the ground crumble, causing the demons to fly away. The Archmage was enchanting magic. A magic circle then appeared where he was standing, and with this magic he casts, the demons near him burned to ashes. Still, there were hundreds of demons in front of Haiban. Haiban's aura becomes scary. He then jumped so high and strongly attacked the area of the demons. The demons flew away and died instantly. At the same time, two demons charged at RMC's area. The guards with RMC warned him of the demon heading to them, but he was calm and told them not to be afraid as he was confident he could defeat it. He then grabbed his sword and slashed the demons. The two guards behind him were impressed and acknowledged what he did, but then he scolded them and commanded them not to let their guard down. He then noticed something charging at him. It was a demon again, but he bravely faced it. Inside the demon's castle, the warrior was able to catch and stab the Demon King. The Demon King accepted his defeat, believing that this was his destiny. The Demon King then permitted the warrior to take his head and told him to enjoy peace to his heart's content. The warrior then ended his life by slashing the sword once again. The morning came, and the heroes went back to the main city. People were cheering for their victory, and they were all happy knowing that peace had been restored. At this time, some people noticed that the chief of security wasn't together with the heroes, but they believed that the chief of security didn't die. There is also a guy who laughed and said that the chief of security might likely be off somewhere, immersed in sword training or something. They didn't know that the chief was just hiding in the pile of citizens watching the heroes. For him, these heroes deserve the respect of people all over the world. He was smiling since he was truly happy that the heroes gained the victory. He also accepted that his rule was sufficient. Neither a hero nor a swordmaster. Meanwhile, he went to the mountain in the place where he usually trained. He was wielding his sword, still practicing his sword technique. He may not have had a natural talent fit swordsmanship, but he just loved the sword. Throughout his life, he has wielded a sword. Even in his youth, during his academy days alongside Haiban, and later when he joined the Imperial Guards, continuously. While he was practicing, he suddenly vomited a lot of blood. He kneeled on the ground and he felt that he was about to die. He believes that the pain he feels will heal quickly if he is young again. He concludes that his time has finally come and he regrets that he didn't become a hero like Haiban and the others. Heroes had no aging, no illness, but alas, he's the only one growing old and frail. He grips to his sword thinking of swinging it one last time. He strongly swung the sword while screaming. He creates a strong blow, making a straight light strike on the ground from above. He was shocked upon seeing it, knowing that this is the state of a human that has reached the peak of the sword, the proof of Swordmaster. He chuckled, proclaiming that he had become a swordmaster himself. He never thought it would happen in his lifetime. But now that it has, there is no point either since he already accepted the fact that he's an old man who will die soon. Still, for him, it wasn't a bad life after all. Becoming a swordmaster before dying is still great for him. After he died, he suddenly woke up. He was confused as he felt no pain, and he also appeared from someone else's room. He rose wondering what place he was right now, and he even thought that he was already in the afterlife. He passed through a mirror, but then he was shocked when he saw someone else's appearance. A young man with white hair, blue eyes, and a thin-built body. He was startled at first, questioning who this young man in the mirror was and where he really was. He immediately went outside thinking that he had been reincarnated into a child's body. He also recalled that this place was the castle in Alak territory, the one where he served in his final years. He never thought that he would be reincarnated in the same hometown of all places. He decided to put it aside as he needed to figure out whose body he was in. While walking around, he saw a lady practicing a sword technique. The lady caught his attention, so he decided to watch for a moment. The lady is pretty with her pink long hair, red eyes, and sexy build body. She was only using a sword made of wood. And while staring at her, our MC was wondering about this lady's information, thinking if she was the Lord's daughter. But then, he didn't remember seeing a kid like her in his previous life. He focused on the sword technique that the lady was practicing, and figured out that it was the sword technique that made her move like a snake. He was sure that this hero's sword technique was invented by someone he knew. Knowing that this technique is hard, he was sure that the lady was quite talented. He was crossing his arms while seriously watching at the lady, but then the lady noticed his presence. You've woken up, Asher. Why are you just standing there when the others are already practicing?" she said. And this time, MC discovered what his name in this world was, and that would be Asher. That's Revenia's sword technique, right? Looking at your skill, you must have practiced consistently for at least 4 or 5 years. However, your sword movement is still a little unstable. Try to relax your grip, and try to slow down the slash movement a bit, he said. The lady was shocked. She was speechless for a moment. She suddenly threw the wooden sword at Asher's head and angrily asked him why he's suddenly speaking so casually to her. "Shouldn't you show some respect to your employer? You should call me Lady Leica." "Understood," she added. Asher quivered. He was stuttering while saying sorry to the lady. It turned out that Leica was his employer, and he felt awkward as he first thought that she was his younger sister. Whatever. By the way, Asher, did you not get enough sleep? You seem a bit off today. For someone who has never wielded a sword, why did you suddenly come here? Moreover, how do you know about the hero's sword technique?" Leica stated, which flustered Asher. Asher was holding the wooden sword and heard the lady asking him how much he knew about sword technique and also commanded him to show it. She also warned him that he would be in trouble if he did not do it properly. Asher was sweating, thinking that he was now in a mess. He cannot believe he's being cheeky enough to teach the lady of this castle. He then walked toward the statue while also thinking that his habit of nagging at his subordinate from his days as a chief seems to have carried over. While he grips the sword, he senses that he still has a sharp sword sense and he feels alive this time. He raised the sword and the lady was surprised with how he positioned himself. Isn't that the Imperial sword technique stance? When did you start learning it? You look more serious than usual today, huh? Leica said. Asher didn't give any response and just focused on himself. He raised his hand while claiming to himself that he had been wielding a sword for over 70 years and even wielded his sword in the last moments of his past life. He then swung his sword and created a super strong blow. The small particles of rocks flow away and even Leica. Asher swung the sword again numerous times and he now realizes that having a young body is quite good, especially since this current body he has is full of energy and it's also so light. It feels like he can fly right away. He charged at the fake enemy and slashed it with the sword. It shattered to pieces and seeing what he did made Leica speechless. She was impressed while staring at Asher. Asher was smiling, admitting it to himself that he just can't control himself when he's holding a sword. He also told himself that he should limit himself from swinging around too much. The ground where he was standing was completely destroyed. He looked at the lady and apologized to her for not controlling himself. No way. That's the Imperial sword technique. The standardized sword technique developed in the Empire, Leica said. She cannot explain how Asher is able to achieve this level of speed and destructive power with such a common and basic sword technique. She suddenly screamed Asher's name and Asher was clueless why. "That's so cool, Asher," she uttered while holding Asher's hand. Because of what she witnessed, she could now say that Asher really had a good talent. She then asked him why he's been hiding the skill all this time. Asher's face blushed and he didn't know what to say. The lady then admitted to him that she truthfully thought he was a stupid and lazy person. But now, he proclaimed that she was mistaken. Right now, MC was thinking of what kind of person Asher was in his normal daily life. "You're flattering me. I only know a little," he said. But for Leica, Asher was lying since she already witnessed that Asher knows more than a little. Asher was aware that his face was already red, so he felt awkward staring at Leica. "All right, come to think of it, what did you say earlier?" "What should I do?" slowly, Leica asked. But all of a sudden, someone came, complaining that they were too noisy. "Leica, what were you doing with Asher just now?" the man said. Leica then addressed the man as Brother Luke. Luke walked toward them while telling Asher that he must go outside and chop some firewood or something instead of daring to talk with his family. He also said that Asher was talking in a cheeky manner. Asher was nervous and didn't know what to say. "You piece of trash. You should better remember that you're just an ordinary citizen while we're noble," Luke stated. "I'm sorry, young Master Luke," Asher replied, and at the same time, he was thinking that Luke was quite the uncouth young master. Luke was staring at the wooden sword Asher was holding and asked him why he was holding Leica's sword. He even thought that Asher intended to learn noble sword techniques. Leica tried to answer, but Luke commanded her to be quiet. "However, I think now is the perfect timing. I just need a sparring partner," Luke stated while grabbing out his sword. He then told Asher that he would admit that Asher was talented if Asher could last 1 minute against him. Leica tried to stop him, but he told her not to worry as he didn't intend to kill Asher. Leica just sighed without his brother knowing that she only believed that her brother could not kill Asher at all. Asher becomes serious. He looked at Luke thinking that the posture of this man was not the correct basic stance for a sword battle. He also wondered how Leica had such an unworthy brother. Right now, he was planning to take down Luke before he got into more trouble. Luke then charged at him while telling him to be prepared. Asher positioned himself and hit the sword of Luke, making it spun above and dropped on the ground. Leica was dumbfounded upon seeing what happened. Asher at the same time realizes that losing on purpose is harder than he thought. Blood dripped on the ground as it turned out that Asher made a scratch on the face of Luke. Luke was dumbfounded. Asher also gasped as he never thought that he would leave a scratch on the young master's face. Luke stares at the blood on his hand and he wonders where it came from. He then realizes that he is wounded on his cheek and screams in pain. He cannot believe that a mere employee hurt his noble lord. Now, Asher feels like he just signed his death wish. Luke immediately brings Asher inside the castle of the Lord of Arak's territory. He tells his parents that Asher, a servant employed by the castle, dared to harm him and he wants his parents to punish Asher severely. His parents were just listening to him. He told them that they could no longer tolerate Asher's actions that disgraced the dignity of the nobility. Asher was nervous. He looked at the Lord as he heard the Lord call his name. Is what Luke said true? The Lord asked. Asher then recalled that the Lord, Lebarak, had become the Lord 40 years ago when he had just been appointed as the captain of the guard. He remembers visiting the guard with the former Lord, and now, he discovered that it is about 20 years had passed since he died. Asher, we have treated you like our own child all this time. Despite your countless misleads, we didn't cast you out and allowed you to remain in the castle as an employee. But this time, you seem to have crossed the line too far. You deserve severe punishment, but considering the affection we've had for you, we will be lenient. Leave the territory immediately, the Lord stated. His wife seemed to disagree with the decision he made. She told her to give another punishment to Asher instead of removing him from the castle. He then told his wife to be quiet and he proclaimed that he had tolerated Asher because of her, but he can no longer forgive this time. His wife was speechless. The Lord then added that they shouldn't continue to show affection to an ungrateful child who doesn't recognize the grace of being raised. Asher was just listening to him and didn't bother to disobey the order of the Lord. The Lord then told him that he was still fortunate for being expelled from the castle in good health. At this moment, Leica came and declared that it was her brother's wrongdoings. She confidently said in front of everyone that Asher did nothing wrong, and she begged her father to release Asher as soon as possible. Luke tried to stop her, but she didn't listen to her brother. She even added that Luke was hurt by his own sword while swinging it at Asher while Asher was just teaching her swordsmanship. Brother's terrible swordsmanship is the real disgrace to the nobility, she added, and hearing what she said made Luke shake in anger. The Lord and his wife were confused. Upon realization, the Lord was dumbfounded since this was the first time hearing that Asher was teaching his daughter swordsmanship. Leica then said that what she said was true and she confidently stated that Asher possesses a high level of imperial swordsmanship, to the extent that she wishes to have him as her mentor. She was sure that Asher had changed and earnestly committed to his swordsmanship training. You want to learn swordsmanship from Asher, who has barely even held a sword. Not only that, but you also want to learn the worthless Imperial swordsmanship style, Leica. Are you in your right mind? Luke said. Leica is still very confident since she has witnessed Asher's swordsmanship with her own eyes, and she tells her brother to have Asher demonstrate his skills directly if he won't believe her. The Lord was so clueless about what was going on. He then called his subordinate Karon and commanded him to test Asher's swordsmanship. His wife was stuttering, saying that Karon is a bit too much to be Asher's opponent. He then told his wife not to worry as it was merely a simple assessment. The Lord doesn't know what trick Asher used to start practicing swordsmanship suddenly and to bewitch Rika, but if this was just a joke, he's willing to let Asher crawl out of the castle half dead. Asher stood with his wooden sword and he was so nervous thinking that this was getting out of hand. Karon was already in front of him and he heard the Lord telling him that his skills would be acknowledged if he could last more than 5 minutes against Karon. Karon was staring at Asher with anger, thinking how Asher, a mere employee, dared to teach Lady Leica, and right now, he had no intention of going easy on him even in front of Lady Benisha. He's very determined to beat Asher up and have him thrown out of the territory. He then charged at Asher and said, "Here I come, Asher." Luckily, Asher was able to block his sword the moment he attacked. Leica was staring at the battle seriously. She was thinking that if what she saw was right, Asher could definitely hold his own against Karon. Asher was staring at Karon. He was sweating and heard Karon telling him that he was already trembling and even thought that Asher really believed swordsmanship would be that easy. "Let me teach you a lesson," Karon uttered and swung his sword and Asher slid away. Karon grits his teeth thinking that Asher hasn't even mastered the basics. And for him, Asher is an insolent brat. He then swung his sword several times and Asher still blocked it. But then, it was very clear that he was struggling. Karon also felt that Asher was a very weak, arrogant fool who dared to try to sully the great swordsmanship. Asher was kneeling on the ground. The Lord crossed his arms while saying that he guessed it was too much to go against Karon. His wife Benisha didn't dare to watch the fight since she was afraid to witness how Karon would harm Asher. Leica at the same time was dumbfounded as she could not believe that Asher could not fight back against Karon. Of course, Luke was cheering for Karon and even said, as expected of the top graduate of the Imperial Academy, truly befitting of a knight commander from an elite swordsmanship background. There's no way Asher could stand against Karon, one of the best in the Empire. Asher was just silent. He was still kneeling on the ground while Karon was standing in front of him thinking that Asher was so weak and pathetic and should always remember clearly the difference between them. Karon stares straight into his eyes with a slight smile on his face. What a nice little performance. Such an adorable little performance. With swordsmanship, an elite in the Empire, truly, Asher suddenly said while slowly standing. Karon was dumbfounded seeing Asher manage to rise. "I'll give you back the words you just said. Do you think the position of Knight Commander is something to be taken lightly? Let me teach you a lesson," Asher stated. He then swung his sword, creating a strong blow causing Karon to fly away. Karon slammed on the corner and seeing what just happened made both Luke, Leica, and their parents surprised. At this time, Karon was struggling in pain. He was nose-bleeding and spitting blood. He cannot believe what Asher did and he wondered what suddenly got into Asher to be this strong. "I barely hit you, and you couldn't even block it. How pathetic. Pick up your sword and stand up, esteemed elite swordsman," Asher stated. "It is because this is an era of peace, without demons or wars. This era has become too dull and weak, which is why Asher wants it to be corrected by disciplining the military." Karon didn't move even an inch. Asher wasn't done talking. His looks are very serious. He was standing still in front of Karon and asked him if he would let himself, the chief of the Empire, the head of the Templars in the Iraq territory, just fall into the hands of a commoner. Karon felt insulted. He then grabbed his sword, stood, and immediately charged at Asher while questioning how a commoner would dare to defeat him. He then swung his sword with full force. Asher's eyes sparkle and he teases Karon by saying that he is still so slow. He extended his arm and clenched his fist, then strongly punched Karon, slamming him down on the ground. The ground crumbled and everyone was speechless. After hitting Karon so hard, he was knocked out in an instant. Asher stood still, staring at Karon thinking that it was a shame for Karon. He concludes that Karon might think he's an old man talking about the old days, but back then, not only a commander like Karon, but even a regular soldier was incomparable than him. Countless skilled and rigorously trained soldiers, hundreds, perhaps thousands, died helplessly against the demons, unable to do anything. It's supposed to be a peaceful era without demons or wars. He wants to always keep a tight grip on the tension and he cannot afford to be this weak. After he knocked out Karon, 4 more knights surrounded him. The Lord stood and Benijah was afraid that he might do something against Asher. "You, who are you?" the Lord asked. He believes that this kid in front of them is not the Asher they knew, so he wants the kid to reveal his true identity. Asher was stuttering. He was wondering what he should say to make the Lord believe that he was really Asher. He then lied that he lost his memory. The lords were shocked upon hearing it. Even Leica and Luke were in disbelief. Asher told them that when he woke up, he couldn't remember anything and didn't even know who he was and who were the people around him. The memory remains as a memory of swordsmanship. He also stated that he thought wielding a sword would help him recover more memories, but it turned out that it's still an empty void. He then claimed that he had really caused harm to the chief. He dropped his sword and kneeled on the ground. He then proclaimed that he was willing to accept his punishment. The Lord was silent for a moment. Benijah at the same time was sad after knowing what happened to Asher. The night came. Asher was inside his room because of the Lord's order. The Lord told him that he needed time to organize his thoughts, so Asher must not leave his room until then. Asher was sitting on his bed and saw a sword inside his room. At the same time, Leica was heading to his room with water and bread. While walking, she told herself that Asher really changed, as if he'd become a completely different person. She remembered that Asher wasn't in that kind of attitude yesterday. The real Asher had never held a sword, and his language and behavior were poor and vulgar. He was a pain in the ass. Asher was Benijah's adopted son. Before Luke and Leica were born, Benijah found Asher abandoned outside the castle. At the time, Benijah was depressed about not having children. She raised Asher herself, without the help of the maids, and poured her love into him. Since Luke and Leica were born, Asher and Leica have been like family, but their relationship has become increasingly delicate. It almost felt like favoritism since Benijah showered Asher with love and obsession. Despite their mother's efforts, Asher grew apart. His behavior caused resentment within the estate. In fact, Asher was about to be kicked out of the castle. However, with Benijah's urging, he was allowed to stay in the castle, but under the condition that he would work as an employee. Luke always mocked Asher while Leica felt sad for him, and she knew Asher was a pathetic kid. But then, Asher suddenly changed, which was clearly seen by Leica. The way he speaks, his behavior, and his personality, everything has changed. For Leica, the current Asher is like a swordmaster who trained for years to reach this level. She arrives at the room of Asher and knocks on the door. She told him that she came with food for him to eat, but since Asher wasn't responding, the lady decided to open the door instead. As she opened, she saw Asher raising the sword right in front of her and had a scary aura with his eyes shining. Leica was scared and let go of the food she brought. The plate shattered to pieces. The water spilled on the ground, and Leica at the same time fell down and shivered in fear. Asher then gets back to his senses and he feels guilty for scaring the lady. He then apologized to her and explained that he saw a sword inside his room and thought of practicing swordsmanship. Leica was still in shock. She didn't stand for a moment and she could not believe that Asher was now practicing swordsmanship. She decided to stay for a moment and watched how Asher swung a sword. She stares at Asher, who is practicing seriously in front of her, and she can feel how obsessed Asher is with swordsmanship, seemed to be so fanatic. Asher suddenly calls him and asks what kind of person he was before. He also informed the lady that he feels that the Lord and Luke's feelings toward him don't seem favorable. Leica then answered that he was not a good kid, and except for her mother, their family, and even the people in the castle don't look kindly upon him. To resort to violence against the residents or destroy property, engaging in acts that defy the employer's name and status. Upon hearing it, Asher realizes that he has crossed the line, knowing that even a servant recognizes their master's face. He then asked Leica why she calmly conversing with him. Leica crossed her arms and replied that it wouldn't be strange if he held her in contempt, and for her, there was no reason to despise him. Besides, she isn't concerned that Asher has lost his memory. If anything, it's for the better. No more bothersome tasks. Besides, isn't your current demeanor an improvement? So, please take care of me, Asher, she added and widely smiled. Asher was just silent while thinking, but his thinking was cut off when another person knocked on the door and asked permission to come in. It was their mother Benijah. The lady was smiling widely. Asher then kneeled in front of Benijah and bowed his head, then said, "Lady Benijah, what do I owe this pleasure?" Benijah suddenly touched his cheek and told him that he didn't need to formally address her. Regardless of what happened to him, no one could deny the fact that she was the one who raised him. She wants Asher to speak as he used to. Asher then addressed her as a mother, but then the lady was surprised that he still remembered she was his mother even if he lost his memories. Asher then told her that he was not the Asher she knew. The lady was too stunned to speak. He knew that he was not the Asher Benijah remembered, and he could not believe that the lady still looked at him with such affection. "Your face, your name, everything, I've forgotten. To me, you're a stranger, he stated. Instead of being sad, Bateria suddenly hugged him tight. She told him that she was the one who first found him. According to her, she hadn't yet produced an heir by the time when she was in her 20s. On days burdened with guilt and self-doubt, she found Asher abandoned outside the castle walls. When she held him in her arms and saw him smile, the world for her had changed. Despite the opposition from others, she raised him with love and care. So even if Asher now considers her a stranger, it's not a big deal for her because, for her, Asher is still her child. I raised and loved you as my own child, she uttered while holding Asher's face. Asher was silent. He was thinking if he could really start a new life as someone else. To be so indifferent and unconcerned, was Asher truly nothing to them? He felt sad for Asher, but he just kept it to himself and told Bateria that he understood. At the same time, the Lord was having a discussion with Luke and Karon. Luke concludes that Asher might be a demon, but the Lord said that it's an excessive assumption. According to him, demons disappeared a long time ago, and even if there were a demon, it wouldn't matter. He was sure that still didn't have a connection to a Asher. If there were demons, he believes that they would probably infiltrate lords or nobles to wield power. Besides, there is no reason to target the body of a mere commoner. One thing he cannot believe right now is a mere child defeated a high-ranking knight like Karon. Karon was lost in words knowing that the Lord was right. Not to mention, for someone as exceptional as Leica to acknowledge and follow you, the Lord said, but before he could complete his words, someone told them that they were having an interesting conversation. The guy who suddenly spoke was sitting on the window with a long sword on his back. The guy was smiling and no one knew his identity. The Lord asked who he was while Karon at the same time changed at him. Karon tried to attack the man, but shockingly, the man caught his sword barehandedly. Not bad swordsmanship. Your stance seems quite solid. You've also hired a decent squire, Leberok, he said. Karon and Leberok were shocked that this man knew Leberok's name. The man then pushed away Karon, causing Karon to fly away and slam on the ground beside Luke. Karon was so annoyed, thinking that he was now in a painful state again. The unknown man stood in front of him and said, "What a shame. If only you were a bit younger, you would have been able to put up a fight." Karon was speechless. The man then asked Leberok if he agreed with him. Leberok now remembers this man who suddenly entered, and he then told him that he was going overboard for hurting Karon, his own knight. Karon was shocked when he realized something. "It's been 20 years. Welcome to my home. The one who reached the pinnacle of the sword. Swordmaster, Haiban Esther," Leberok stated. Haiban then smiled at him. Leberok addressed him as Majesty and asked him where he had been. Haiban suddenly vanished 20 years ago, so Leberok thought he was already dead. Leberok sat on the table, smiled, and said that he had something to investigate. According to him, he traveled to the ends of the continent into the horizon of the world. But then, he didn't figure out everything. He then mentioned that the word he heard earlier that there was a kid who defeated the Knight of Leberok. Karon then said it was true that he was defeated. Leberok then also informed him that the kid was a commoner who had never properly studied swordsmanship. Haiban suddenly laughed and said that the kid Leberok mentioned must have possessed exceptional talent. He got so interested, so he asked Leberok to tell him more about the kid. The next day, Leica and Asher met since Asher agreed to train the lady. He permitted the lady to attack him with all her strength, but the lady was hesitant since Asher hadn't even drawn his sword. Asher then told her that it wasn't about swordsmanship, but training for real combat. Even before Leica drew her sword. "Let me reiterate, you must attack with the intent to stab me," he added. For someone who barely managed to stay in the castle, Leica requested to be his disciple. He refused due to their difference in status, but her determination was unyielding enough to bore her head to him. Right now, Leica was shaking. She followed what Asher said and charged at him. She swung her sword many times, and Asher of course was able to dodge it. At the same time, he was aware that Leica was still using the heroic swordsmanship technique, the swordsmanship of Reveni. As what he observes, Leica really had the talent, and her skills were decent. It's just that, she's weak. He managed to catch her hand and threw the lady on the corner. For him, Leica's moves are straight out of a textbook. Leica was in pain, and Asher then offered to help her stand. "My lady is strong, but that is only as far as swordsmanship goes," he said. He also told her that the real combat was a different story altogether. Asher has seen countless people die on the battlefield because they overestimated themselves. He told Leica that she must train her body and mind before swordsmanship. Leica got annoyed at him and asked for his real identity. She was annoyed by the fact that Asher behaved as if he had experienced a war. She tried to attack, but Asher managed to dodge once again and caught her on guard. He then replied that he just wanted to give her some common sense to understand that swordsmanship and real combat are different. Leica was moaning in pain and complained that what Asher did to her right now wasn't swordsmanship. Asher then told her that she must abandon blind faith in swordsmanship since merely possessing swordsmanship skills won't help her survive in real combat. He then grabbed the sword and advised Leica that she needed the application of swordsmanship and a way to control her emotions. She must never lose her cool and composure in front of her opponent. He wants her to be able to swing her sword flexibly and overpower her opponent's swordsmanship. He swung the sword and the lady admitted it to herself that he did a flawless strike. Asher then looked at her and said that he would teach him real combat skills that apply swordsmanship. Leica then smiled as she also wanted to have proper training with Asher. Afternoon came, Leica was panting. She was so tired after practicing for long. She even feels she's going to collapse at this moment. She's already inside the castle and she's heading back to her room. While walking, her whole body was trembling in pain. She was also annoyed thinking that Asher didn't know the meaning of moderation for pushing her, a noble lady, to this extent. Plus, Asher had monstrous stamina and never lost against her. But the good part is that she feels like she has gotten stronger in just one day. She stared at her hand and suddenly heard a voice calling her name. It turned out that her brother was standing right in front of her with crossed arms. Luke was mad, asking her if she was playing with Asher. She then said it wasn't a play but a training. Training my ass. Is being with a man training? Luke stated. But Leica just walked away and let him think what he wanted. Mind your manners, little sister. You're disgracing the dignity of a noble. You're a noble, and he's a commoner. Nobles are supposed to show generosity to commoners. You shouldn't learn from someone like him, Luke said, but these words from him angered Leica. She pointed her sword at Luke and Luke was startled by her action. She then ordered her brother to shut up, and Luke rattled and said, You're going to hit me. The heir of the Lord. If you hit me, it won't end well for you. Leica then replied that she didn't care at all. She then turned around when she heard an unfamiliar voice laughing and said that a daughter was trying to hit the eldest son. It was Haiban, and he added that his sight right now is quite rare. He's together with Leberok, and Leberok apologizes knowing that the scene of his children fighting is such a disgrace behavior. Leberok then approaches Leica and tells her that he managed to get past Asher, but he wants no one, even Leica, to hurt Luke any further. Even you won't be able to get away with it quietly. He added. Leica accepted that she did wrong, so she apologizes to her father. She then looked straight at Haiban, wondering who this uncle was. While staring at Haiban, she feels something extraordinary about him. She was shocked the moment she saw Luke bow to Haiban and addressed him as Swordmaster. I am Luke Havark, heir of the great Havark family, Luke stated. Leica was dumbfounded knowing that Swordmaster is the pinnacle of swordsmanship, respected beyond position and rank. There are less than 10 such superhumans across the vast empire. As a swordsman myself, I have long admired your heroic swordsmanship, Sir Haiban. I wish to become your disciple, Luke added. Luke was confident that Haiban would accept him. He thought that his sister Leica wasn't aware that there are ranks even among masters, and only a sword master can truly teach swordsmanship. But then, he cannot believe that Haiban ignored him and talked to Leica. Haiban widely smiled at Leica and even said that it was nice for him to meet her. At this moment, Haiban feels that Leica feels no intimidation at all, even in front of him, and she is ready to attack anytime he steps it. He was smiling and secretly thinking of trying to test her. He then reached for his sword and unleashed it. Leica was startled while both Leberok and Luke panicked. But then, Leica suddenly feels confident. He then remembered what Asher told her, that she shouldn't be overwhelmed by her opponent's aura, and the moment she instinctively swings her sword out of fear, she will be defeated. As per Asher, maintaining composure in front of any opponent is fundamental. Leica then saw that aura from Haiban. At this time, she becomes serious. She managed to block Haiban's huge sword the moment Haiban tried to attack her. Haiban was impressed with the way she moved. When he sees promising young talents, he usually approaches them aggressively to gauge their reactions. But normally, they either flee in fear of the overwhelming presence or they can't even withstand a light sword strike. Yet Leica, a young woman, stands her ground with a wooden stick, fearlessly facing his sword strike. From what he can observe, Leica has the makings of a warrior. He smiled while thinking about it. He was distracted, so Leica had the chance to swing her sword, causing Haiban to move away from her. Still, he was smiling at her genuinely. Leica screamed while charging at Haiban while using the snake move, the technique she always practiced. Because of the move she used, Haiban concludes that she must be from Ravenia's sword technique school. Leica then attacked him numerous times and he just blocked it. While blocking Leica's sword, he uttered that she had impressive skill. But when he swung his sword with a little bit of force, Leica flew away and dropped the sword. She felt pain and she was annoyed the moment Haiban pointed his huge sword at her. Leberok then begged Haiban to stop, and Haiban then looked at him and said that, unlike his cowardly son, He had a very commendable and brave daughter. Luke was annoyed upon hearing it. Leberok at the same time heard Haiban's question if his daughter was Asher's disciple. Leberok then answers yes, and Haiban then looks back at Leica, but then Leica sees his move as an opening, so she immediately kicks him. He then grabbed her sword, but when he pointed it toward Haiban, Haiban disappeared. It turned out that Haiban was already at her back and suddenly held her head and said that she even counterattacked while he was distracted, which was very impressive. Leica was startled and wondered how Haiban suddenly appeared behind her. Given time, you might rival Revenia, Haiban said, and he asked her a favor to guide him to her master. Leica agreed, and she thought that Haiban might not be an ordinary man. They then headed to Leica's master using a carriage. Leica was sitting inside, staring at Haiban, thinking that he handled her full force attack like it was just a child's play. She also didn't expect her father to be so cautious around Haiban. Haiban then asked her if her name was Leica, and she casually answered yes. What did you feel watching that child's swordsmanship? Haiban asked, and she then answered, it felt like watching the swordsmanship of a seasoned veteran. Haiban then laughed, as he never thought an 18-year-old kid would be called a veteran. They arrived at the training ground, and Haiban mentioned that it had been long since he visited this place. They get out of the carriage, and while walking, Haiban mentions that he once sparred in this training ground with a dear friend. A good friend, but is no longer with them. Leberok then said condolence, and he replied that it was fine already with him since it was 20 years ago. Leica with them was just silent. She doesn't have any idea who this friend Haiban mentioned. When they arrived at their final destination, they saw Asher practicing a sword technique. Asher paused the moment he heard Leica call his name. He then looked at her and asked her why she came back. But then, before he could hear an answer, he saw Haiban, which surprised him the most. Haiban was smiling at him. He was nervous, wondering why Haiban suddenly came. It's good to see you, child, Haiban said. Asher then also saw Leberok and realized why Haiban was here right now. That is because Haiban was Leberok's guardian. Back when Leberok was young, during the tenure of the previous lord, he specifically asked Haiban to look after him, so he believes Haiban should be somewhat familiar with Leberok. He uttered Haiban's name, and Haiban was so happy that Asher knew his name, and he informed him that he had been waiting to meet him. Haiban showed a familiar smile and reached for his sword. This time, Asher knew this kind of habit of Haiban, a habit of testing the skills of young talents. He slightly smiled, as it had been a while since he last fought with Haiban. But the moment Haiban unleashed his sword, Asher was able to hit his sword, causing him to let go of it. He was dumbfounded, thinking that Asher truly had impeccable swordsmanship. And because of Asher's move, he remembered his close friend who died without knowing that that friend was right in front of him. The move Asher made was imperial swordsmanship, just for self-defense, and Asher, back in his previous life, said that this technique was nothing compared to a swordmaster like Haiban. Haiban then also told him that they had just taken different paths. It's just that he achieved a different level. That time, Haiban challenged the captain of the guard to spar. He never forgot his friend's movement and the way he looked at him after executing a self-defense. That stare was also the stare of Asher right now. After recalling it, Haiban was speechless. Guard's captain, he uttered, and hearing it from him made Asher dumbfounded. They both didn't move for a moment. Since Leberok overheard what Haiban said, he was also confused and asked him to repeat it. Haiban then told him not to mind it, as it was nothing. Haiban then addressed Asher as a kid. But Asher at this moment was thinking if Haiban already noticed his real identity. Are you perhaps a disciple of that guy? He asked, and Asher was glad that Haiban hadn't found out his identity. He then said that he didn't know who Haiban was talking about, but he didn't have a master. Haiban then smiled upon hearing it and invited Asher to be his disciple. Upon hearing it, Leberok was shocked and wanted to stop Haiban. But before he could do it, Leica interfered and said, whether you're a swordmaster or not, I don't know, but old man, you've been attacking someone who's just standing still. What kind of behavior is this? Just because you're a swordmaster, does it mean you can swing your sword at anyone? Haiban doesn't know what to answer. Fortunately for him, Leberok scolded his daughter for addressing Haiban as an old man. Haiban picked up his sword and said that he would show it himself if who he really was. His aura was scary. His black smoke emerges from his sword until it becomes so strong. A wind spun around them, and Leica and Asher were aware that this was an aura. They then heard Haiban say they were right. It was a mark of a swordmaster, the aura. Haiban's eyes were so bright. He looked very serious and suddenly attacked the ground. Small rocks flew away, and he created a strong blow of wind, making Leica and Leberok cover their faces with their hands. When the wind disappears, Leberok then checks the surroundings and sees the real power of a swordmaster. Haiban was able to destroy some parts of the area, and then proclaimed that he was a swordmaster. Asher gulped after witnessing the real power of Haiban. Haiban then looked at him and told him that talented individuals like him are destined to reach great heights. "How about it, kid? Won't you become my disciple?" Haiban asked. Leberok didn't dare to resist. For him, just the name alone as a disciple of a swordmaster carries immense authority. Leica at the same time confirms the unbelievable power of Haiban, and she cannot think how strong she could become if he will be one of Haiban's disciples. Asher was staring at Haiban with an emotionless face. After a few seconds, he refused the offer. Haiban, Leberok, and Leica were dumbfounded as they never thought Asher would decline. The next day, too many people were very loud outside the castle. That is because they heard that the Swordmaster had come to the territory and they all wanted to become Haiban's disciple. They begged Karon to let them meet the Swordmaster. Karon then informed them all that the Swordmaster already had a disciple. Kalos at this moment was wounded and he was so annoyed hearing the people's curiosity and begged to be Haiban's disciple. At the same time, Asher was in the backyard of the castle, still practicing his sword movement. He heard the chaos outside the castle, screaming at people wishing the Swordmaster to have a long life. Haiban suddenly came with a cup of coffee and he asked him why he didn't go out. Haiban sipped his coffee and then answered that he would be sticking with Asher for a while. Asher was hoping that Haiban was just joking. He angrily stares at Haiban and tells him that he really doesn't want to be his disciple. Haiban is already clinging to him, begging to become his disciple. And for him, it was ridiculous if he would become Haiban, his friend back in his previous life, to be his disciple. He then pointed at Leica, telling Haiban to look after Leica instead of him since Leica would be more worth teaching than him. Leica was mad with what Asher said. She stares with anger at both men. As per Haiban, he already asked Leica to be his disciple, but Leica also politely declined and said that she already had a master so she could not learn from anyone else. Asher was shocked upon hearing it, knowing that he was the master Leica was referring to. Leica turned around and started leaving. Asher cannot believe that this lady turned down the offer to become a swordmaster's disciple just to learn from him. "There's no need for that," he uttered. When the night came, Luke was heading back to the castle. He came from the tavern and he seemed to be drunk. He brought a bottle of alcohol and he was complaining about his life. He remembered how Haiban told Leberok that he had a cowardly son but also had a brave, admirable daughter. For Luke, there is no use in being a noble, and he blames Asher for everything that happened to him now. Because of the anger he feels toward Asher, he wants him to disappear as soon as possible. He really believes that it was because of Asher why his life now became a mess. He wasn't aware that there was something following him. He drank the alcohol and he was suddenly attacked, causing the bottle to drop on the ground. He was startled and scared upon seeing a dark thing surrounding him and wrapped around his body. It turned out that he was captive by an assassin who used a shadow technique. The assassin was chuckling after successfully catching him. Luke was brought into an abandoned place. He regained consciousness after the day had passed and he wondered where he was. He was startled when he heard a voice say, "Heir to the territory like Havoc." A man then appeared, and it had the face of a demon. "Nice to meet you," he uttered. At the same time, Leica complains that she cannot stand Haiban any longer. Asher was practicing while talking with her. He told her that she should show some respect to Haiban since Haiban is still a swordmaster. "You don't look at him with respect either, Asher," Leica replied. And Asher cannot tell honestly that it is because Haiban was his friend for a long time. Additionally, he has reached the level of Swordmaster too. He then told Leica that it wouldn't hurt to learn from Haiban since Haiban was also the one who mastered the heroic swordsmanship that Leica aimed for. But then, Leica said that she only wanted to be like him. Asher paused upon hearing it and asked the lady to repeat what she said. Leica then told him that he was the only one she aspired to be. "I truly respect you and consider you as my master, so stop putting yourself down like that," she added. Asher was silent. He remembered that he had no talent in swordsmanship. All the swordsmanship in this world was created by heroes of the past. All swordsmen learn heroic swordsmanship and wish to surpass human limitations like them. But he was different. Imperial swordsmanship is a basic and simple swordsmanship created and distributed by the Empire that anyone can learn. It was the only swordsmanship that someone without talent like him could learn. He has lived his whole life wielding a sword sticking only to Imperial swordsmanship. So now, he cannot believe that a talented child like Leica respects someone like him. He doesn't know that for Leica, he was the one who made her strong. She concludes that she would not have been able to withstand Haiban's pressure if it were not because of Asher's training. For her, Asher's guidance and teaching helped her immensely, which is why Asher is her guiding light. Haiban suddenly came and asked them if they were having a lover's quarrel. "Don't be ridiculous. What's that in your hand, Master Haiban?" Asher replied. Haiban genuinely smiled at him and said that the thing he brought was a present for him. "Oh my, you're not fixated on the form of weapons besides swordsmanship. you'll be able to handle various weapons, right? He asked. Asher said he was right. However, there was a but. Knowing that imperial swordsmanship is for building a foundation. It is a straightforward and practical style, unlike heroic swordsmanship, which is built on profound principles and superhuman technique. But its advantage is that it can be applied to various weapons, unlike heroic swordsmanship. He was also able to handle various weapons besides swords. He had to utilize all the skills he had to survive in actual battle. He wore it. He knew that this pair of gloves was called iron gloves. Haiban instructed him to put strength into his arm and imagine any weapon. He then started thinking. He closed his eyes and imagined a dagger. Lightning emerges from the gloves and a dagger then suddenly appears in his hand. Leica was amazed upon seeing it. How is it? Seems usable, right? Haiban asked, and Asher then asked him if it was magic. According to Haiban, it was really magic, specifically spatial magic. This is a weapon storage gauntlet. To put something in, the user should imagine putting it in. He informed Asher that only weapons could be stored inside. Asher then said that this item was useful to him, but then, he believed it would be useless for swordsmen who are fixated on the form of their weapons, so he asked Haiban why he made it. Haiban smiled and answered that he didn't make it for himself. He made it with some of his other companions to give it to their friend, but that friend was already gone without receiving it. Asher was speechless and touched upon hearing it. Leica then suddenly asked if he was referring to a friend from 20 years ago that he mentioned when they were in the training ground. Haiban then answered yes and added that that friend was also someone who used imperial swordsmanship. Although we took different paths, I like that guy, he uttered while staring at the sky. He said that that friend accepted his lack of talent and didn't give up but instead calmly walked his own path, a kind of enlightenment. And there is no reason not to respect that friend. Asher was silent. He realizes that he was wrong for keeping his distance from Haiban and others. He really thought someone without talent like him would not have any value to heroes, and he never thought Haiban cared enough to make something like the gloves just for him. He was standing still and heard Haiban say that Asher resembled his friend, the blunt way of speaking and behavior. His eyes and his swordsmanship were also exactly the same. I was envious. So how about it? Becoming my disciple, Haiban said once again, which annoyed Leica. Haiban smiled the moment Asher replied that he would accept his offer, but only temporarily, and he also mentioned that he is still willing to teach Leica. Then, let's have a spar right now, he said while summoning a spear. He was smiling as he was grateful for having a friend like Haiban who never forgot him. Haiban then grabbed his sword and accepted Asher's invitation. Leica at the same time thinks that Asher was satisfied with the present Haiban gave, which is why he agreed to be Haiban's disciple. And of course, she's glad that Asher gained a master with quite the reputation. The spar between the two had started. At the same time, the assassin in front of Luke mentioned that he heard a rumor that the Swordmaster was in the village, so he came to check. Luke asked who he was and he said that he was part of the Assassination guild called Motorola. They came here to seek permission from the Lord's Son to establish themselves in this palace. Luke was shocked since he already heard about Motorola, the world's largest assassination guild which appeared 50 years ago. He cannot think of a reason why they came here all of a sudden, and when he got an idea, he then permitted this guild to stay in their territory, however, on the condition that they would also accept his offer. The assassin smiled and ordered to see what his condition was. As expected, he wants this assassin to kill Asher. The assassin guy in front of him laughed upon hearing his request. A few days later, Asher started practicing with Haiban. He was very serious, giving a good strike that creates a strong blow, but was still able to be blocked by Haiban. Haiban was so impressed with the way he moved, and he could sense that Asher's raw combat ability was on par with him. Mostman's honed to perfection, he said, and Asher replied that it is all he have to offer. And this time, Haiban swung his weapon with full force, causing Asher to fly away. Luckily, Asher managed to stand still while still holding his sword. Haiban then said, "It's a shame that besides the imperial swordsmanship, you don't seem to have a knack for heroic swordsmanship." Haiban's stare was very serious. Asher suddenly threw a dagger at him, but he easily caught it and said that Asher seems to have adapted to using tools. Asher was smiling and said, "That's why you need to make good use of these small tricks." Haiban flicked back the dagger toward Asher while telling him that he cannot just unleash the overwhelming power of heroic swordsmanship with just imperial swordsmanship in actual combat. So, magic that complements the limitations of swordsmanship like this will be useful. Asher catches the dagger and says that he agrees with Haiban's statement. Since receiving the gauntlet, he has been training with Haiban every single day to adapt to the tool. And of course, he is still teaching Leica. At this moment, he told Haiban that Leica was cut above him in terms of talent. Haiban then suddenly asked him if he aren't worried about his heart with Leica always around. Asher then confidently answered not at all. Haiban then said that he was too boring, and he mentioned that Asher's stoic personality is just like his friend. He laughed and said that his friend only learned imperial swordsmanship and was a guy who only despaired, thinking he had no talent. Asher was just listening and didn't show interest to make sure that Haiban wouldn't think he was his friend. Haiban then added that his friend always thinks of his own business, but still, they also really thought that that friend of his had no talent. What talent even is? Haiban asked with a serious tone. Asher also becomes silent as he never thought Haiban would say such a thing. Back then, Haiban believed in talent and considered his own talent a blessing. But now, he has changed his values in just a few years past. And because of it, Asher got curious about what happened to him in those years. Leica suddenly came and she walked toward them while informing them that they had a guest from the Empire. Asher was confused as to why, while Haiban got annoyed and said that those people were such a troublesome bunch. The visitors then went to them and greeted Haiban. The captain of the Imperial Knights then asked Haiban to return to the capital with them. Captain of the Knights, you say? I expected the successor to the captain of the guard to arrive. Haiban said, but he was cut off by the Knights captain informing him that the captain of the guards was currently occupied with other matters. Haiban then agreed to come with them, but it should be tomorrow since the time is already late. He then permitted them to rest for the day and travel the day after. Haiban then greeted Leberok since it had been a long when they last saw each other. Leberok then said farewell to him. Leica was surprised the moment Haiban approached her and said, "It was nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll see each other again someday, though I don't know what path you will take." And Leica then only answered yes. Back then, there was a time when Asher, the captain of the guard in his previous life, practiced in the middle of the night. But then, he got distracted when he heard someone telling him that he had no talent at all. That person suggested him to find another job instead of wasting time, but then he refused and said that he did it because he wanted to. Besides, he would have given up long ago if he had planned to crumble at the lack of talent. It turned out that the person who dared to mock him was Lapinia Harvest. A word of advice: you will achieve nothing, your talent is pathetic and worthless to that extent. You'll return to the earth as a third-rate swordsman, at best. That is your future, Lapinia said. At the present time, Asher woke up as it turned out that he was dreaming of that memory from his past life. He feels relieved that he was just dreaming, but he was sure that it was a memory from his past life, which was a very disgusting dream. Lapinia is the youngest swordmaster, the genius of the sword, and the one who tells Asher that he will not achieve anything. Asher started practicing during dawn while claiming that Lapinia's prediction about his life was wrong since he became a swordmaster at the end of his life. Moreover, now he's mentoring a child who might become Lapinia's successor. He suddenly smiled and proclaimed that Lapinia was wrong after all. While practicing, Haiban suddenly came and asked him why he was practicing at late hours. Asher then looked at him and said that he had a nightmare and couldn't sleep. He then asked Haiban was he was also awake, and Haiban then replied that he was leaving for the Empire at dawn. "We won't see each other for a while, my disciple. We should have some quality time together," Haiban stated. Haiban becomes serious while informing Asher that he has been traveling the world for the past 20 years to find contradictions and experience the changing world. But after meeting Asher, he thinks he has figured it out. Asher grips his sword, waiting for Haiban to say clearly to him what he means to say. A bloodlust suddenly emerges. Haiban's eyes were shining and he was reaching his sword. "How false the things I believed in were," he uttered. Asher was flustered, and Haiban suddenly swung his sword towards Asher. Asher stood still, and it turned out that Haiban only struck his sword on the ground. The ground crumbled and many creatures behind Asher flew away. Asher was shocked upon seeing it. He stares at it for a moment and Haiban then utters, "This is it, the truth I've uncovered after 20 years of traveling." It turned out that it was demons, and according to Haiban, demons had been relentlessly chasing him, lurking behind him since earlier. Asher then wonders why demons are here, and he concludes that these creatures should have been banished from the world by the heroes. Haiban then said yes, as he was sure that the heroes surely defeated the Demon King back then. With that, all dark beings like demons and monsters had disappeared. That's the truth known to the world, the history Haiban has experienced. But now, he realizes that the fact that the Demon King and the demons disappeared is just a lie. It turned out that these demons ended up chasing him, trying to eliminate him and keep the truth hidden. At this moment, lots of demons surrounded them, and Asher then said that dealing with these creatures was their top priority. The demons were roaring while charging at them. Asher slashed his sword and killed 3 demons at a time. There are another 3 demons behind him, charging at him with killing intent. He then summoned a new weapon, a double-blade battle axe. He then swung it going behind and eliminated several demons. While he was fighting, Haiban was observing his movement. Haiban was also attacking demons using his sword, but he could still focus on staring at Asher. He remembered what Leica said, that Asher had the skill of a seasoned veteran. He smiled, thinking that Asher right now looks very similar to his commander friend. Also, for him, Asher isn't just an ordinary child. He can say that Asher has a talent, a true swordsmanship talent. He even told himself that his swordsmanship was nothing compared to Asher's. His eyes were blazing and struck a strong attack, eliminating numerous demons while wondering what kind of swordsmanship Asher had and what level of mastery. After a short period of time, they finally wiped out the demons. There was one who was still breathing, but Haiban killed it by stabbing its face without any hesitation. He then proclaimed that the demonic beings had returned to the world. According to him, he also suspected that Asher might be a demonic entity. He thought Asher might be a demon imitating the appearance of a child after consuming the memories of his friend, Jinwoo. Asher then asked him if he was referring to a doppelganger, and he then answered yes. But then, demons cannot mimic the swordsmanship of a human who has reached such mastery, which is why he confirmed that Asher is indeed a human, a child who only resembles his deceased friend. He then walked away while informing Asher that he would go to the Empire to reveal the truth and warn the people of the impending danger. Following that, he must search for the missing hero. He looked back at Asher and said, "Asher, I hope we meet again someday. Next time, I want to have a longer conversation with you." Asher was just silent and just stared at Haiban leaving the place. He went back to the castle and he still couldn't sleep. He was still thinking about heroes and wondered if the warrior hero really failed to defeat the Demon King. When the world was burning due to the Demon King's arrival, that warrior appeared like a comet and repelled the demons. He was strong and radiant, like a hero from a fairy tale. But, just like Haiban, he disappeared 20 years ago, abandoning the land and people he ruled. Asher stood and stared at the window while thinking where that warrior have vanished. If the hero fails to defeat the Demon King, he cannot how they could explain the peace that the world has enjoyed all this time. Regardless, he believes that his duty remains unchanged. Whether he uncovered the secret or not, whether he knew the truth or not, he still wanted to continue to wield his sword, a thing that would never change. Since the sun rose, he then immediately went outside his room and planned to train again. While walking, Luke suddenly appeared in front of him. Luke was very serious, but then he suddenly smiled and handed a piece of paper to Asher. When the night came, the Motorola Guild was having a discussion about how they would deal with Asher. The head mentioned that Asher is the Swordmaster's disciple, but then someone said that Asher is still a kid after all, a kid with no talent who only knows the Imperial swordsmanship. But for the head, Asher is dangerous as he is different. According to him, when their organization first revealed itself to the world, the person who brought it to the brink of destruction was also someone who had learned the Imperial swordsmanship, and he wanted his men to always remember it. That was because our organization was weak back then. Now it's different, the assassin replied. He unleashed his sword and proclaimed that Asher would fall by his hand. As the one who carries on the legacy of the hero, he believes that he won't be defeated by something as inferior as Imperial swordsmanship. The head then agreed with him and permitted him to do what he planned to do. At this hour, the place was very silent. Asher was holding the piece of paper Luke gave and instructed him earlier to head to the alleyway listed on the paper. He suddenly chuckled and said it was interesting. He stopped walking and said, "Why don't you come out?" A shadow then appeared right in front of him, and 4 assassins then showed up. He was shocked to see these people, knowing that they were from Motorola Guild. "What business do you have with this humble body?" he asked. The assassins were shocked as they never thought that a mere kid knew them. The leader of these assassins then appeared and said that this would be interesting as he never expected Asher to know their guild. "Did the Swordmaster tell you about us, brat?" he asked, and Asher slightly smiled and then replied that he knew well enough. But of course, he didn't mention that he had fought them in his past life. Back then, these guys had settled in this territory as well. He found and completely destroyed their base. The assassin then proclaimed that Asher had come to seek his own grave. Asher just smiled and there was one assassin behind him, but he instantly sensed it and immediately stabbed him. "The past, same as before, you scum are still chatty, even after being mercilessly cut down by the Imperial swordsmanship," he stated, which shocked the assassins. The leader was dumbfounded and asked him how he knew about it. Asher then said that his answer is not important since his goal is what matters here. He gripped his sword while stating that there was only one thing he needed to do. At the same time in the Empire, Haiban had arrived. He went directly to the Emperor and said, "It's been over 20 years. You used to seem quite clever back then, but now you're just an old man burdened by reality." The Emperor then replied, "As ever, you still lack respect for the royal family." Haiban sat down and stated that he walked the path of the sword, so human authority means nothing to him. The Emperor then opened a topic about rumors that he had heard. According to him, the rift has opened, and the demons have reappeared. Haiban then said that the rumor was true and his top priority now is finding the hero, so he need the Empire's cooperation on that. He then heard the Emperor apologize and said that finding the hero would be difficult. Haiban then looked at the Emperor and he asked what he meant to say. The Emperor then added that it was not the only problem they would face since they were laughably short on manpower. In short, the hero isn't the only one who disappeared. Haiban was confused, so he asked the same question to the Emperor. Going back to Asher, he was pointing his sword at the enemies, and the leader of the assassins then stated that he normally should kill Asher, but then he changed his mind. You better tell me how you know about our past, he added. Asher didn't want to give an answer but instead challenged them to try him. One assassin charged at him, but Asher was aware of it and immediately swung his weapon and eliminated another assassin. More assassins charged at him, and this time he summoned daggers and threw them at the assassins, hitting their necks. Now, only the leader left. He chuckled and said that Asher was using some cheap tricks, a desperate struggle of a weak human. Despite what he said, Asher is still grateful for the gauntlet. You sure are thorough in your preparations, I'll give you that. To think you'd hide a weapon in your clothes, the assassin stated, which made Asher realize that this guy didn't notice that he was using spatial magic to generate a weapon. Asher then told the assassin that this would be his end. But then, the assassin said that Asher would fall before his great swordsmanship. His dark power appeared and Asher believes that this power is the swordsmanship of Motorola. He saw this technique back then, a swordsmanship that hides its form, travels through darkness, and strikes at vital points. The assassin guy smiled upon hearing that Asher also knew about this technique. His intention is to perish Asher at the hands of his great swordsmanship. He surrounds the dark aura toward Asher while Asher prepares to battle. The assassin tried to attack Asher, but Asher managed to block, but it was unconventional for him as he cannot predict the attack patterns. The assassin teased him and attacked him with a strong blow. Asher slid backward and moaned in pain. He let go of his sword and kneeled on the ground. The assassin guy then pointed a sword at him. Asher then stated that this guy seemed quite talented, as it's a difficult swordsmanship to master. The assassin then agreed and proudly said that he was one of the 13 honored seats, recognized by the master of Matulia. The honored seats, still clinging to that title. How pathetic, Asher said. He then asked the guy why Motorola Guild was targeting him. But then, the assassin questioned him if there was a scenario when an assassin provided their target with reasons. Asher suddenly chuckled and said, I'm going to die anyway. Can't you grant a dying man his last wish? Well, it doesn't matter. We came to this land specifically to kill you, the assassin replied. He explained that killing Asher was decreed by the Oracle. Asher then concludes that the Oracle specifically targeted him. The assassin then said yes and questioned Asher if it already answered suffice. But then, his eyes rounded the moment Asher stabbed him with a spear as he was able to summon a weapon using the gauntlet. The assassin was dumbfounded and wondered how it happened. Asher then answered that it was what he called a cheap trick. Meanwhile in the castle, Luke was still awake. He was drinking wine inside his room. His face blushed since he already drunk a lot. He was smiling, thinking that Asher was now dead at this moment. He feels great while thinking about it. No matter how skilled you are, Asher, these are beings of a different level. He uttered and drank the wine in his bottle. But then, he heard a voice who suddenly entered his room. He dropped the glass of wine and he fell on the ground shivering in fear. He uttered Asher's name as it turned out that his unexpected visitor was Asher. Asher was very serious, inviting Luke to have a word with him. Asher entered the room of Luke and Luke was panicking while asking why he had come. What do you mean by that? Asher asked, since the question of Luke sounds like Asher shouldn't be in this palace. Luke was staring at him with anger, wondering if he really defeated the Motorola guys and if he discovered that Luke was the one who ordered the assassinations. Asher walks toward Luke while Luke begs him not to come closer. He looked very scared as if he had seen a ghost. How dare you step into a noble's quarters? He asked with a stuttering voice. Shockingly, Asher raised the sword he was holding and he showed no reaction at all. Luke screamed in fear the moment he saw Asher swing the sword. But it turned out that Asher only slashed the wall just to scare Luke and said that he could overlook Luke's actions lightly. But this time, Luke has crossed the line a little too far. Luke was terrified and begged Asher to spare his life. Asher moved closer to him with a scary glare and told him that he was hoping Luke wouldn't disturb his peace with such disgraceful acts again. He then grabbed his sword and walked away while telling Luke that this is the last time he's dealing with him. He even calls Luke a young master to show respect to him despite that this man ordered someone to assassinate him. He was also hoping that both of them wouldn't cross paths again to avoid any further unpleasantness. This is your final warning, he uttered while staring a little at Luke. After he left, Luke cannot move. He was still leaning on the wall with his tears dripping from his eyes because of how scared he was. At the same time in the Motorola Guild, one assassin came to their head and reported that they had failed to execute Asher. As expected, defeated again by the Imperial swordsmanship. Just like before. It's unsettling, no matter how I think about it. Who exactly is that child? The head stated. He was bothered, that is because he remembered the man who also used Imperial swordsmanship and defeated them back then without knowing that that guy was also Asher in his previous life. A lady suddenly walked toward him while laughing loudly. The head then looked at her and she concluded that this old man really believed there was a link between Asher and the former guard captain just because Asher also wields Imperial swordsmanship. To think the renowned Motorola couldn't even handle a single child. Pathetic. She added. The head then replied that their past experiences with the Imperial level 1 swordsmanship aren't pleasant, which is why he was bothered. The lady then activates her magic power and tells the head that he was simply outmatched due to his lack of skill, so she's willing to take care of Asher herself instead, using the mighty power of the god, Manhwa. Meanwhile, early in the morning, people in the village were disturbed upon seeing the corpses of the assassins, and they had heard that these assassins tried to threaten their young master Luke and enter the village. They also heard that the one who wiped all out these assassins is Asher, which they cannot believe. Some people also recalled that Asher is the one who was recently chosen as a disciple by the Swordmaster. They cannot think of a reason why Asher, the one they knew as a troublemaker, has changed so drastically. While people were gossiping, Karon was listening to them, but even he was also clueless. After a few minutes, he went to Leberok and saw the lord so problematic of what happened to their village. Karon reported to him that the entire village could have been destroyed because of the assassin's attack. Leberok was so disappointed in his son Luke, blaming him for what happened. Luke at this time hasn't come out of his room yet. He was shaking in fear sitting on his bed, and since he hadn't eaten yet, the maid brought him some food. Since he will be the future lord, his father believes that he needs to reflect more on his actions to endanger their own territory. Leberok then asked Karon about the situation outside the village, and as per Karon, things had fortunately been settled and the atmosphere was stabilizing. Leberok was looking at the people and noticed that people's perception of Asher was gradually improving. Since Asher is the one who wiped out all the assassins, Leberok wants to show his gratitude to him. But he is still curious about Asher's true identity. Karon also cannot believe that someone's personality really changes that drastically and becomes so strong. Leberok then mentioned that Haiban assured them that Asher couldn't be a demon, but for him, Asher is still indeed a dangerous individual. He was sure that Asher could easily destroy the Alak territory if he were to use his powers with malicious intent. But nevertheless, Asher chose to fight for them and save their village. One thing he wants to make sure of right now is check if Asher is truly on their side or if he has another motive. He grabbed the scroll and opened it while saying that an opportunity for them to do it had come. He proclaimed that they needed to observe how Asher will react. Karon was so confused about what Leberok was trying to say. But Leberok didn't explain it further and instead thinks that he also never expected this chance. At the same time, Asher was onside his room cleaning his sword. He was thinking about the guild Motorola and recalled the last conversation he had with the assassin. He ordered that guy to tell him the truth about their real motive and why their god wants him dead. But then, the assassin replied that he didn't know any reason since they only followed their god's orders. He added that the oracle was to kill Asher and only acted after gathering information that Asher was in the village. At that time, Asher realizes that these people originally planned to use Luke to establish a foothold in the village. The assassin confirmed it and begged Asher to spare his life since he already told the truth. The assassin guy was shaking in fear, hoping that Asher would release him. But then, Asher told him that he never said to spare his life. He grabbed his sword and killed that guy. Right now, Asher believes that Motorola is plotting something, which is why he is bothered since he doesn't have any idea about what it is. Motorola is a cult that worships the god Manhwa. The leader, who holds the honored seat, received powerful strength from this god. They expanded their influence using God's power, but Asher defeated them all in the past. After disappearing for a while, they showed up again to kill him now, so he wondered why. He was worried that Manhwa knew that he reincarnated into a young boy's body. He then remembered that Sword's Gate and decided to immediately head to the capital. He concludes that someone there might know about the secret of his reincarnation. While he was thinking, Leica passed through his room and she was startled the moment she heard Asher call her name. The lady seemed to be nervous while informing Asher that she had received a proposal for an arranged marriage. Asher was shocked upon hearing it and he knew that the lady wasn't in favor of it. Earlier, Leica was called to her father's office and informed her about the marriage proposal. Of course, she refused with the reason that she was not ready to get married yet. Upon hearing her declining the offer, her father seemed to be disappointed, but he claimed that he understood how Leica felt. But then, there is no choice either because of the other party whom they cannot be able to refuse. Leberok just told Leica to meet the man first, believing that her future groom might be a good person. Leica didn't say any words and just left. At the present time, she was in the backyard together with Asher. She was so sad since she believed that arranged marriage was just like being sold to a prestigious family. Asher then said that the family who proposed marriage to their family might be quite powerful, which is why Leberok cannot refuse. Leica then replied that it would be the Count of Bateria. Asher was shocked upon hearing it since he knew this person. The Count is one of the past heroes and the current Lord of Bateria named Vaka Bateria. He had ties with Asher in his previous life. He was not particularly outstanding or accomplished, but he was a virtuous man who governed his territory well. The people praised him as a hero. Lord Valbaka is proposing to you, Asher asked, but Leica was annoyed and said that it was Valbaka's son. She feels disgusted imagining that she would be marrying an old man, and Asher then realizes that Leica is right since he has gone so long, so Valbaka is surely so old at this time. He was bothered as he could not think of a reason why Valbaka's son would be involved in an arranged marriage. Back in his previous life, Valbaka introduced his son to him in the name Burrows. He still remembered that he told Valbaka that time that he had a valiant son since Burrows was very eager to learn swordsmanship. Asher also opened up to Valbaka that he had heard that marriage proposals were already being circulated among the noble families. But Valbaka that time didn't care about arranged marriage since he intended to let his son marry someone he loved, regardless of whether a noble or just a commoner. For Asher, Valbaka back then wasn't a typical aristocrat, but a humble and unpretentious. He never expected that even someone like Valbaka would have to succumb to the reality of nobility. While he was thinking, Leica mentioned that she heard Asher single-handedly dispose of the assassin organization that invaded their territory. I wish I could be as strong as you. Now, I can't even hold a sword, she added. And Asher then replied, you are truly talented, young miss. It's a pity to see you go. Leica suddenly looked at him with a serious face and him if he would grant her one last favor to ask. Asher was confused. He grabbed his sword and pointed his sword to the lady while asking her if she was asking for a final duel. Leica then confidently answered yes and said that she wouldn't be able to hold a sword anymore, which is why she wants to have one last battle. Come on, don't hold back, she uttered. Asher smiled seeing her confidence. The lady then charged at him while screaming, here I come. They spar for peacefully, but Leica felt tired in an instant. She let go of her sword and gasped. She lay down on the ground while Asher walked toward her and asked if that was all she had. She then replied that she couldn't go on any longer. All of a sudden, someone came. It was her mother who was worried for her. Her mother suddenly held her hand and cried. The lady was also kneeling on the ground and Leica then asked her why she's more sad than her. You had an arranged marriage too and you're doing fine, she said. And her mother then replied that she and Leberok knew each other beforehand, while Leica's case right now is she hasn't met her future husband even once. Still, they're from a hero's family, so what could go wrong? Forming ties with them will benefit us as well, Leica stated. Benija then called Asher to ask for a favor from him. Asher then permitted her to say it and Benija then asked her to accompany Leica and look after her when she went to Balatria's territory. She'll need someone to talk to in a foreign place. Besides, you're the closest to Leica. I'm worried, Benija said. Asher was shocked, but he replied that he understood. Besides, he also wanted to meet Valbaka Balatria since he wondered how this man changed. Meanwhile, they rode into a carriage heading to the territory of Count Balatria. Inside the carriage, Leica was crossing her arms while waiting for their arrival. She was annoyed seeing Karon with them inside the carriage, knowing that her father also sent him. Karon was sitting beside Asher and they never talked to each other at all. Why would my father send someone we're not comfortable with? Leica said, and Karon then casually replied that it was the Lord's order so he could not refuse. He then bows down his head while recalling the order of Leberok to him, which is to keep an eye on Asher since Leberok believes that Asher's real target was Leica. Leberok also thinks that Asher has been concealing his motives and planning everything all along. He knew that Asher wouldn't risk his life for a territory and castle he always despised, so it is unlikely he's behind this. The only person who truly acknowledges Asher and follows him is Leica, so Leberok deduces that if Leica leaves, Asher might slowly reveal his hostility towards the territory, which is why he orders Karon to watch Asher's actions and uncover his true intentions. Karon didn't dare to refuse the given order, which is why he was now together with Asher and Leica. He concludes that this marriage proposal was merely a scheme to win over Leica's affection. At the same time, Asher was thinking that Leberok still doubted him. Garen grits his teeth out of anger, thinking that he will cut down Asher immediately if Asher tries anything funny with Leica. While thinking, Leica suddenly asked him how much longer until they arrived. Garen then looked around and proclaimed that they were entering the Count's territory, so they should arrive in about half a day. It's not that far. It's surprising we've had so little interaction with people despite being so close, Leica said. She was shocked and asked why the moment Garen stated that Bateria's territory had been isolated from the outside world for the past 20 years. As per Garen, he doesn't know the reason, and it was also surprising for him that they've suddenly brought up an arranged marriage after all this time. Asher was just listening to Garen's statement, and he was also shocked after what he just heard. Well, it's probably nothing. But why is the Lord there called a hero? Leica asked. And as per Garen, Vaka was seen as a saint, not typical of the nobility. According to him, Lord Vaka was born into a prominent count's family. He could have lived a life of notable nobility. But after witnessing the world's harsh realities during his travels, Lord Vaka decided to abandon the noble life and become a lord who cared for the sick and weak. Vaka dismantled his castle and sold all his treasures, using the money to help the starving. He imposed only minimal taxes on his tenants and even took up farming himself. The villagers admired him for these actions and hailed him as a hero. After hearing Vaka's story, Leica then commented that it is not easy for a noble to live like how Vaka lives, and so concludes that Vaka is surely a remarkable person. Garen then smiled and agreed with her. He added that Bateria became a very peaceful place with different kinds of people because of Vaka's influence. He was confident that the place had been called a paradise when no murder or bandits. All of a sudden, the coachman gets off the horse and informs them that there are bandits who have appeared. Leica was disappointed since Garen had just mentioned that there were no bandits in this area. As they looked toward the bandits, they saw scary faces, men holding weapons, and glared at them with a terrifying look. Garen then grabbed his sword and volunteered to handle the bandits. But when he got off the carriage, Leica also told him that she would go and fight too. Asher then told the lady to stay, and he also stood to fight against the bandits. Still, Leica insisted and confidently said that she was not weak to easily fall to mere bandits. It's not just about your strength, it's about your state of mind. You're not yet accustomed to taking lives, Asher said, which flustered Leica and remained speechless. Asher then gets off the carriage while telling the lady once again that he and Garen would be the ones to handle the bandits. At the same time, he thought that it might be the Motorola Guild who had come to this place too. He then walked closer to the bandits and prepared himself for the battle. But then, he flinched when he noticed something. It turned out that the men looked very weak and scared. They were shaking, ordering them to hand some money and food. Asher was confused as he couldn't believe that this kind of people would be bandits. Garen didn't notice what he just noticed. He stood in front of the people and declared that the carriage they blocked was owned by Lord Leberok of Alak. He then warned them to be cut down if they would take one more step. This time, Asher interfered by telling Garen to stop what he was doing. Garen was confused, so Asher then told him that these people who dared to block them weren't bandits. He believes that these people were just starving farmers who fled. They're not planning to run away. For them, death by sword or hunger is the same. Asher added and grabbed the small bag from his back, then threw it to the men in front of them. He then told them that inside the bag were gold coins. He allowed them to buy whatever food or supplies they needed and leave. They then run away while giving thanks for Asher's kindness. Garen then told Asher why he used his own money, but Asher didn't care since he wasn't planning to use it anytime soon. He then looked back straight to the farmers and concluded that these people had fled from Bateria based on the direction they were heading. Upon hearing it, Garen was dumbfounded and couldn't believe it since this wasn't the Bateria territory he knew. Since the unknown people had disappeared, Leica got out of the carriage and asked them what happened. Asher then told her not to worry since everything had been resolved. He also informed the lady that those people were raiders heading towards Bateria. Leica was also shocked upon knowing it. They ride in the carriage and continue their conversation inside. Bandits this far into the Count's territory, not to mention those assassins who attacked our territory. The world is indeed becoming more dangerous. How dare they cause such trouble in this peaceful territory? Leica said with crossed arms. Garen at this moment was still speechless because of Asher's conclusion. Asher was also silent, thinking about what was going on with Vaka. After several hours, they had finally arrived at Bateria territory. They entered the village and got out of the carriage, staring at the castle of Vaka. The place has a dark aura and the castle of Vaka is enormous in size. Garen couldn't believe what he saw while Leica reminded him that he mentioned when they were on their way that Vaka tore down his own castle and lived modestly to avoid luxury. Leica was startled when she heard a voice welcoming them. It was a man wearing a white suit, walking towards them together with his 2 personal knights. He already expecting the visitors, and he introduced his name, which was Burroughs Bateria. "It's an honor to meet you," he said. Leica pointed her finger at Burroughs and concluded that this guy would be her fiancé. Burroughs then said that it was something he wasn't hoping for, but Karon and Leica were shocked because of what he said, as it seemed like he was also forced into this marriage. They rode in the carriage again to explore the territory of Bateria. This time, Asher noticed a lot of changes in this place. The village looks like a slum full of hungry people. Back then, this village was very clean and the people were genuinely happy. But now, the people looked very depressed and they were very thin. Leica was also looking around and was hesitant to believe that they were at the Bateria territory. Burroughs then suddenly told her that the mood in this village had been quite menacing lately, and there had been a series of murders recently, so he asked the 3 to try avoiding making eye contact with the villagers. Leica and Karon were confused, but they never dared to say such words. Meanwhile, they had entered the castle. The Bateria family had prepared lots of delicious food on the table and let them 3 eat alone. But then, they cannot eat because of what they see in the village. Leica said that the village is completely a slum with a den of bandits. She also didn't expect to have a lavish feast when the people outside were starving and looked frail. It upset her, which is why she cannot eat even a little. The same as the 2 men beside her, and Karon even said that this wasn't the Bateria he knew. Burroughs suddenly came back and asked them if they were done with their meal. He informed Leica that his father wanted to see her, and she then walked to follow Burroughs, but then Karon suddenly called Burroughs, but Burroughs already expected that Karon would say that Bateria is very different from what he knew. "You'd better not hold any expectations, for my father is nothing more than a monster now," he added. They then went to Vaka and saw him sitting on his throne. His body is so huge, different from the people outside the castle. "Nice to meet you. I am Vaka Bateria," he said upon seeing 3 men kneel in front of him with the lady. Vaka drank some wine while saying that the 3 might have been on quite a journey from such a remote place. He was grateful, saying that Alac territory is showing a small effort to respond to a call from the great hero's family. Because of his actions, Karon gets annoyed, thinking that this lord is very rude. At the same time, Asher was staring at Vaka, thinking of what really happened to him. Now, he could say that Vaka has changed so much from the person he once knew and now become so vulgar. Leica doesn't like the aura of Vaka. She remained standing and heard Vaka ask for her name. She then said she was Leica, but then Vaka mentioned her name several times while licking his own mouth, and his saliva dripped. Leica flustered upon seeing it. Vaka then told her that her name was very lovely. When the night came, Leica and Burroughs were outside of Vaka's room. Shockingly, Burroughs is asking her to sleep in Lord Vaka's room. Of course, Leica refused, as she couldn't imagine sleeping in the Lord's bed. She then told Burroughs that she would go where Asher and Karon were. But then, Burroughs told her not to feel burdened, since it was his father's special wish to accommodate her. "Rest comfortably, please," he added. But Leica still doesn't like it at all. It gives her a vibe that something ominous would happen. And she was thinking of what Vaka was plotting with his sly face earlier. Burroughs entered his father's hall first, and his father then asked him if he let Leica in. He then answered yes, and surprisingly, there were 2 helpless ladies serving Vaka, and based on their faces, they seemed being forced. At this time, Vaka asked Burroughs if he remembered the story he used to tell him when he was young. Burroughs was clenching his fists, and he was trembling. He then answered that he remembered it well, and his father then claimed that he told him to marry the one he loved. But since Burroughs couldn't find a proper bride, he planned to marry him to the daughter of the Alac family, which was Leica. However, seeing Leica, he believes that she's more suitable as his bride than Burroughs, so he believes this would work out, since he was thinking of taking another wife after all. "What do you mean?" Burroughs asked, and Vaka then chuckled and proclaimed that he would take Leica as his concubine. At the same time, in the respective room of Karon and Asher, they cannot sleep at all, thinking about what happened to Vaka. Karon was wondering how Vaka fell into such depravity. The Vaka Asher remembered was endlessly gentle and humble. Bateria was once a lively and beautiful place, but now, the current Vaka is consumed by arrogance and greed. As the Lord indulges in drunkenness and pleasure, it's no wonder why there are starving and desperate residents who were forced to flee and resort to plundering. He cannot believe that this is now the current Bateria he once knew. He was annoyed thinking about it, but he got distracted upon hearing someone knock on the door. Burroughs instantly entered and called both Karon and Asher as Lord, informing them they had something to tell them. Both men were clueless, and the moment Burroughs told his father's plan for Leica, Karon got angry and punched the table, causing it to shatter into pieces. He asked Burroughs if it was really true, and Burroughs then answered yes without any hesitation. According to him, his engagement has been annulled, and his father will marry in his place. Karon was shaking in anger. He then rushed outside while Burroughs asked him where he was going. "I will bring back Lady Leica. I can no longer watch her be toyed with," he answered. Asher called him, but then the one who answered was Burroughs, telling him it was fine. "You are indeed a loyal knight. I understand your sentiments," Burroughs said. He also knew from the very beginning that Asher never wanted a political marriage. "With your exceptional talent in swordsmanship, you wished to follow the path of the sword, didn't you?" he asked. Asher flinched and asked him how he knew it. Burroughs then honestly replied that he runs an intelligence organization, so he's well aware of the situation in Alac territory. According to him, Father isolated the territory to prevent information from leaking outside, so he employed a back alley organization to gather intel. He knows the Lord of Alac didn't sell his daughter into a political marriage for personal gain. Their family is a powerful hero's family, so no one could refuse any of their proposals. He looked out the window and said that even if the hero was no more, his father ordered that Lady Leica be accommodated her in his room, which made him uneasy, so he arranged for her to stay in the annex instead. He has secretly opened the back door. At dawn, he wants Asher and Karon to take Leica and leave the territory while he stays, and will try to persuade his father somehow. Asher then seized the chance to ask Burroughs about what happened to his father. Burroughs then replied that his father had changed about 20 years ago. Vaka began to brutally exploit the residents, taking their grain, livestock, and money. He used the resources to build a palace, neglecting the people's suffering. While the people outside groaned in pain and starved to death, Vaka indulged in pleasure within the castle, ignoring the territory. Asher then recalled that Vaka was once called a saint, for he loved the territory and its residents. Burroughs smiled slightly and said that his father always told him something in the past, that is, to marry the one he loves. But 5 years ago, he fell in love with a woman and brought her to his father. The lady was a commoner, but a good person. But then, the next day, the woman he loved was dead. She was killed by Vaka for harboring lustful feelings toward a noble. Remembering it made him mad. He was shaking in anger and asked if that would be something a saint would do. While he was venting his anger, he suddenly heard his father saying, "Bateria, I am the master. You give me your trust, and I give you my loyalty." He was startled upon hearing it. He turns around and realizes that Asher is no longer behind him. At this moment, Vaka continues drinking his wine. He guffaws and proclaims that he will now go to the room where Leica is. But then, Asher appeared behind him and grabbed his bottle of wine. "Who are you?" Vaka asked. "Behemothia, year 43. But Vaka rarely drank alcohol, especially such expensive wine. He refused it when I offered it, saying he didn't care for it." Asher replied. Vaka felt insulted and asked Asher if he was aware of where he was. Asher bravely uttered Vaka's name and ordered him to recite the oath of Bateria. But then, Vaka doesn't know what Asher was talking about. And because of his response, Asher figured out that this guy in front of him wasn't the real Vaka. He then activates the power of his gloves and summons a dagger while charging at Vaka. Vaka panicked upon seeing Asher's movement, but then blood splattered the moment Asher attacked him. At the same time, outside the castle, Karon was pulling the lady with him to immediately bring her back to Alac territory. The lady asked him where they were going, and he just told her that they needed to leave Bateria's territory as soon as possible. He also told the lady that Vaka is no good to her, that greedy lord is lusting after you, he added, making the lady shocked. They then reached their carriage and Karon told her to stay inside. But then, the lady asked him where was Asher. He then flinched as he also remembered that Asher wasn't with them. They then suddenly heard an emergency noise. The knights nearby then declared that there were intruders who attacked the lord. Leica was so clueless while Karon was dumbfounded, thinking that it might be Asher. At the same time, Burroughs also rushed to his father's throne, asking the knights about what was going on. The lord in front of him then said that he heard the lord's screams from outside. As they entered the hall, Burroughs was shocked when he saw his own father bathing his own blood while Asher was standing beside him. He uttered father, but then Asher told him that the current Vaka wasn't his father. He was sure that it was a being that infiltrated human bodies and took their appearances, in short, a demon. Everyone was shocked. Burroughs then asked Asher if he meant to say that it was a doppelganger. Unfortunately, Burroughs didn't believe Asher. He concludes that Asher thinks he's an idiot who can't tell the difference between a human and a demon. He proclaimed that if his father had been attacked by a doppelganger, he would have lost all of his memories and probably wouldn't even have recognized him and would have attacked him. But Valbaka's memories were as sharp as ever and still remembered everything that happened. Burroughs believes that his father just changed his personality over the years. He admitted that his father was now a monster, but he could not deny the fact that Valbaka is still his father. He was shaking again, saying that he believed his father would change someday. "What right did you have to do that to him?" he screamed. But Asher never said anything. Burroughs then ordered the knights with him to attack Asher. But then, before they could go near Asher, Valbaka moaned in pain. The knights and Burroughs were shocked the moment they saw Valbaka regain consciousness. Asher at the same time remained expressionless since he already expected what would happen. "I've been discovered. You're all so dumb," the demon who possessed Valbaka's body stated. Right now, the demon is clearly visible. He was laughing and he exposed his real appearance. The knights are scared while Burroughs is in disbelief. He cannot believe that a real doppelganger possessed his father's body for 20 years without anyone noticing. The demon stared at them and told them that they were lowly humans. At this moment, Karon was rushing back to the hall of Valbaka. He ran as fast as he could, knowing that it was really Asher who dared to attack the Lord. But when he arrived, he saw knights flying away right in front of him. He grits his teeth out of anger when he witnesses a demon inside. "What is the world is it, sweet boy?" the demon asked, and Burroughs then asked this demon if he killed his father. The demon then replied that he was having fun killing Valbaka and his fiancée. He said that his original plan was to play with Burroughs' fiancée and then slowly kill her. Burroughs was full of anger upon hearing it. Then he heard someone screaming, telling him to run away. It was Karon. Karon entered the hall and charged at the demon. He tried to attack the demon, but the demon easily caught his sword. The demon stared at Karon, and Karon then said that this filthy monster should die. He then swung his sword several times, but the demon was capable of blocking each of his attacks. The demon admitted that Karon was a skilled human, but then he was confident that it wasn't enough. The demon swung his hand, making Karon's sword break while saying that he didn't have the time to spend playing with him. Karon and Burroughs were harmed by the demon's attack. They slammed into the wall strongly, and the demon then looked slightly at Asher, asking him how he discovered his true identity. The oath of Bateria, he always carried it in his heart, always talked about it, the belief he had in his people. Asher replied. He also added that it was Valbaka's catchphrase, which was the very essence of his identity as Valbaka. "How can anyone talk about Valka if they don't know?" he asked. The demon then replied that he didn't know there was such a thing. To play Valbaka's role as effectively as possible, he went through his journey. He didn't want to be taken advantage of as easily as he had been in the past, like his clan, which got exterminated as soon as their identities were revealed. He grabbed Asher's head and said that no one knew who he was for the past 20 years. But there was a brat, which is Asher, who figured it out in just a minute. "Before you die, I shall ask, who are you, child?" he asked. Asher then replied without any hesitation that he was the Imperial Swordmaster. He was confident to say it since Garen and Burroughs were unconscious. The demon was shocked upon hearing it. "Just like you said, your clan was wiped off the map by a human, the Imperial Swordmaster. I thought I had killed all of them back then, but it looks like there's one left," Asher stated. The demon was dumbfounded. He was in disbelief, but before he could do anything to Asher, Asher immediately stabbed his mouth. He moaned in pain while staring at Asher. Asher also stared at him and said, "Long time no see, doppelganger." After he killed the demon, he then approached Burroughs and woke him up. Burroughs then rises and Asher asks him if he's fine. Burroughs then asked about the doppelganger, then he saw the corpse of the demon. Asher assisted him while saying that he took the demon by surprise. He then informed Burroughs that the demons were seeking revenge for something in the past. Burroughs stares at him while thinking about how a mere child discovered the real identity of the demon. Leica suddenly came and called Asher. She immediately assisted Karon and asked for some help, knowing that her knight was in pain. The Knights of Bateria then assisted Burroughs and asked him if he was fine, and he answered that he guessed so. He then asked the knight to take care of all the wounded, and he also asked time to speak with Leica privately. The next day, Asher went outside the castle. The original aura of the territory of Bateria, which was peaceful, now came back. Asher went directly to the grave of Valbaka and stared at it for a moment. He then heard Burroughs say that they had built a grave for his father. Burroughs walked toward Asher while saying that they had recovered his father's body and established a memorial in his honor, despite that he was aware it was too late. "I'm sorry for your loss," Asher said. Burroughs then replied that it was fine. He was broken knowing that he was deceived, worshipping a demon, unaware it wasn't his father. He was glad they were able to save the manor, and he was grateful to Asher knowing that it was because of Asher's help. Asher then asked him what would happen to Bateria now. Burroughs then looked at their territory and replied that he would be the one in charge now. He planned to rebuild the houses that were attacked by the demon, but he knew he would never be as good lord as his father. Asher felt sad remembering the quote of Valbaka. Back then, Valbaka claimed that he was nothing, and their territory only existed because of the people. Valbaka didn't rule them but instead supported them, proclaiming that it was the real nobility. There are words I hold close to my heart, words I say to myself every day, the oath fo Bateria, Valbaka said once before. He flinched the moment Burroughs told him that he claimed to have used the oath to expose the demon's weakness. But then, the oath is just a secret that is shared among family and close associates. And now, he was wondering how Asher knew about it, and he was well informed about demons. Asher was wondering if his existence was suspicious, and now he confirmed it. At the castle of Bateria, Karon finally regained consciousness. Leica was with him, informing him that a demon known as a doppelganger had been impersonating people by stealing their bodies. Karon was shocked upon knowing that Lord Valbaka had impersonated a demon. Right now, they both confirmed that the hero and the marriage weren't corrupted at all, as it turned out that it was all the work of a filthy demon. Leica then told him not to worry since the marriage had been cancelled by Burroughs. When she had a conversation with Burroughs last night, Burroughs informed her that the marriage was null and void because the demons arranged it against his will. Moreover, he will also leave this place as soon as possible. Right now, Asher told Burroughs that he is Haiban's apprentice, which is why Burroughs didn't overthink things since Haiban was a close friend of his father. And since Asher was Haiban's apprentice, Burroughs believes that he can trust Asher. Besides, he heard a lot about Haiban from the captain of the guards. He suddenly kneeled in front of Asher and gave thanks to him for saving Bateria territory. Asher cannot believe seeing a nobleman bowing to a commoner. "Thank you, Asher," Burroughs said. He stood and promised to do his best to fulfill if there was something Asher wanted to request in return for the favor in the name of Bateria. Asher smiled as he was glad to see the attitude of Burroughs the same to his father. He was an heir of his father's humility, and he knew that Burroughs would be a great lord. The next 2 days, Asher, Leica, and Karon went back to Alak territory. Karon reported immediately to Leberok that the Lord of Bateria was a doppelganger. Leberok then said that it is what Haiban meant. Karon then asked him what it is, and he answered that Haiban warned about a world crisis. True to his word. First the Motorola, then the demons. I fear the next event that'll happen. We must not let our guard down, Leberok stated. And Karon then said he understood. Leberok then admitted that Asher has saved them many times and is now becoming their hero. He thinks it's time for him to change his opinion about Asher. He guesses he doesn't need to be that cautious anymore. While saying it, he wasn't aware that Asher was outside his room listening to his voice. He was wondering if Leberok would really trust him. He then walked away wondering what would happen if Leberok's memories were lost. His body changed, all of it overnight. Just like a doppelganger, a demon. He wondered why Leberok trusted a demon. He was hoping that Leberok would no longer antagonize him, for he had no interest in him, nor did he intend to stay here long. He had work to do, so he was planning to leave this place. Right now, he stares at the window and says, "Hey, come out now." Someone then appeared behind him saying, "You look like a brat." "I heard the whole story, kid." "No, Swordmaster's apprentice." Asher was looking at him. This guy belonged to the Topic Intelligence Organization. When Bateria was surrounded by demons, Burroughs discreetly employed the intelligence organization to maintain communication with the outside world. The time when Burroughs offered any help to Asher, Asher then said that he would like the authorization to hire the organization. Burroughs then permitted him since he didn't need the organization anymore now that their territory was finally peaceful. Burroughs asked him why he needed the organization, and he replied that it was just for personal use. Still, Burroughs sensed there was more to it, but he didn't force Asher to tell him honestly, but instead happily let him authorize the organization. And Katros, head of the Topic Intelligence Organization. The guy said. Asher then introduced himself as the new employee of Topic Intelligence. Katros then said that Asher was familiar to him and he was impressed by his performance. He witnessed how Asher killed the doppelganger in one fell swoop. Asher then said that he wasn't aware Katros was there watching. Katros then stated that he should be able to keep a low profile as the head of intelligence. And as he observes, the doppelganger might know something about Asher. Asher remained silent, but he thought that this guy had great ears hearing someone else's conversation. Katros then said it doesn't matter to him anymore. Right now, he wanted to know what Asher wanted to do with an intelligence organization. "You're not trying to find a lost puppy, are you?" he asked, and Asher then said that he was searching for the whereabouts of the heroes. Katros was shocked, and Asher then said that he wanted to know where are the so-called heroes from the past. He wants to confirm if those heroes have either disappeared or become twisted. The fact that Haiban and Vaka, for instance, have been missing for 20 years. The latter's body was stolen by a doppelganger, and the other was hunted by demons. Now, with the demons' return, the world is in danger, but they have no idea where the other heroes are, especially the one who defeated the Demon King and banished demons from the world. He informed Katros that they would focus on the whereabouts of Valorant, the warrior. Upon hearing what he wanted, Katros was dumbfounded as he never thought Asher would order this kind of task. "Is this too much for a small intelligence organization like yours?" Asher asked, and Katros confidently answered no while pointing his finger at Asher, claiming that there is no information in the world they can't find. "So you're saying it's possible?" Asher asked, and Katros replied of course. He then flees while telling Asher to wait for him to come back again. Katros went outside the castle. He was sitting above the roof of one of the houses in the village while admitting to himself that his pride made him accept the task. He didn't even know how to find such extensive information, but he planned to start in the capital. He looked below as he saw Asher walking. He whispered that Asher was a cocky brat for giving a task to search for the whereabouts of the past heroes. But because of the given task, he becomes interested to know about Asher. He then jumped on the roof of the houses heading somewhere else while thinking that Asher was going to be tough to deal with. At the nearby village, there were 2 mercenaries and 1 old man riding in a carriage. The mercenaries were talking about the rumors they heard that Bateria had opened up its territory. It has been closed for decades, which is why they were surprised now. But then, it was an advantage for them so they could have more territory to deal with. Still, one of them wondered why Bateria was closed for so long. The other guy then replied that it was because of a demon. The old man suddenly interfered by saying that it has to make sense. He believes that demons are a lie, knowing that demons died many years ago. The 2 guys then asked him what the demons looked like since they had never seen one. According to the old man, demons are huge, horrible-looking monsters. He added that a lot of people died back then. He was almost trampled to death running away with his mother. Then a hero saved them. He saw it with his own eyes. He only saw them then, but he still remembers their faces. For him, those heroes were marvelous, and he wants young people to learn to appreciate heroes since he was sure that the world wouldn't be peaceful without them. He was sure that the demons who were appearing were just rumors, but then there were monsters who charged at them without them noticing it. One of the mercenaries saw the monsters, and before they could do anything, they got attacked. Back in the Alak territory, Asher was walking in the hallway while thinking that the beings that threatened human life had reappeared. And now, he was expecting that the next encounter would be soonest. When he reached the backyard, he saw Leica practicing sword technique. Leica looked at him the moment he called her. He walked toward the lady and asked her why she was trained. Leica then replied that she couldn't just keep quiet, knowing that everyone in the village trained because of the demon's attack, and the demons also made the atmosphere tense. She has only seen demons in the book, which is why she doesn't know how to fight them. Asher agreed, and he guessed people in this era don't know much about demons. More suspense needs to be added. All of a sudden, someone screamed, asking for help. Both of them panicked, and then they saw a man full of blood and explained that he was on the way to the manor, but was being attacked. Leica and Asher then rushed to him, and the man was shaking in fear, asking for help. He informed them that demons had appeared from the forest and attacked their carriage. Leica and Asher were shocked upon hearing it. Asher was dumbfounded as he never expected that another attack would be soonest. The old man, 1 mercenary, the coachman, and even the horse were harmed during the attack. Asher, Leica, together with the knights rushed outside the village. Leica asked Asher what was going on, but Asher didn't respond since he was still in disbelief. The knights then rescue the wounded while Asher observes the surroundings to make sure that the attack really came from demons. Based on his observation, the attack really isn't the work of bandits. There were footprints left, which wasn't a footprint of a human. There were also crude-looking weapon fragments. Leica was busy asking the wounded old man if he was fine, and the old man was coughing and spitting blood while trying to explain what happened to them. Leica called some knights to assist the old man, but before they could help him, the old man proclaimed that goblins were back. Leica was shocked when the old man said that the ones who attacked them were goblins. The knights were gossiping behind Asher while Asher was thinking that monsters really came back. Monsters are extraterrestrial creatures of various races. They were hostile and once a threat to humans, attacking everyone. But like the demons, they're all gone now. Right now, he was thinking of how and why these monsters reappear. They brought the wounded men to the infirmary, and since the old man was still capable of talking, he informed Leica and Asher that he was also a merchant who was returning from a nearby estate with loads of goods. Then, goblins suddenly appeared from the woods, attacked their wagon, and looted the goods. Since Leica had never seen any goblins, she asked the old man about what this creature was. As per the old man, goblins are small green-skinned, Pointy-earned monsters. The old man was about to explain further, but then Asher interfered by saying that the goblins exist in the old man's golden years. However, they disappeared from the world along with the demons many years ago. Leica was shocked by the knowledge Asher had. The old man was also surprised that a kid knew a lot about monsters. Asher then lied that he only read about monsters in his history books. The old man then stated that there hadn't been a monster in sight since the war ended, so now, he wondered where those monsters came from. Many years ago, the demons were slain by heroes, along with any other beings who threatened human existence. The passageways to the demonic realm were sealed off. Every last one of the dragons was slain, and monsters were driven very far away from the domains. A hero known as the Queen of the North Sea, the northern territory ruled by Ravenia, had monsters over there under control. They had ceased hostility against humans and lived in harmony and order among other races. However, monsters have broken the long-standing order of the North and are attacking humans. Also, Asher knew that Ravenia had gone missing, so the North was in chaos. "Sir, if you know about goblins, do you also know how to defeat them?" Leica asked. And according to the old man, he was too young at the time to know it. Besides, the adults did the fighting while he was only watching. In addition, it was too long ago, so he didn't think anyone knew it. The next morning, the town was in turmoil, and it was noticed by Leica since they went into town buying some goods. According to Leica, the rumors of assassins, monsters, and demons have spread. "Is your lordship aware of this?" Asher asked. And Leica then replied, "Yes, he's had a meeting with the vassals." But then, none of the vassals seem to know anything about goblins or monsters, nor there are any books written about them. They also cannot find anyone who fought those monsters many years ago. Upon hearing it, Asher thought that some heroes might be dead and gone by now just like him. Goblins are a sub-race of monsters. They can be tricky when in groups but are overall weak. But in an age where people have no concept or common sense about monsters, they're frightening enough. They had observed that the city was in a bad mood, and they were aware that it was because of bad things happened so far. At this moment, Asher was planning to get rid of anything quickly that got in his way. While thinking too much, Leica noticed his silence, but she suddenly smiled, thinking that Asher was planning on something. The night came. Asher was about to leave the castle to find the goblins, but then Leica suddenly poked his back. He turned his head around and saw the lady smiling at him. "I knew you wouldn't stay still. You're off to see the goblins, aren't you?" "I'll go with you," Leica said. Asher then told her it was too dangerous, plus the Lord would surely be furious once he found out. But then, Leica leads the way while saying that it would set a bad example for the village if her father finds out that Asher fought. Plus, she knew they could not even go out from the front door right now since the guards were on hard watch. She opened her secret passage and said that they could use this passage that she only knew of in times like this. She then asked Asher to come over, and they both then successfully exited the castle without disturbing anyone. "By the way, do you know where the goblins are?" Leica asked, and Asher then replied that they would go over where the carriage was attacked. He didn't forget that there were footprints of the goblins, so he believed they could fight the goblins' lair by following the footprints. He then wrote while telling the lady to stay behind and just follow. Leica followed him while saying that she would not let the goblins get away. While they were running, they didn't notice that there were already goblins sighting them. And the tall one then said that these humans roaming around seemed to be fearless. Asher and Leica continue heading to the forest to find the base of the goblins, and lucky for them, no one dares to follow them. Asher was running fast, but then Leica felt tired and asked him to slow down a bit. Still, Asher refused to slow down as he believed that they were almost at the goblin's base. After a minute, he stopped running and observed the surroundings. Leica at the same time was panting. Asher then told her that goblins love humid places, so he was sure it would be here in a stronghold near a swamp. Leica was puzzled. She was wondering how Asher knew about goblins. Asher then noticed something. He then told Leica to breathe slowly. They kneeled on the ground and they finally found the base of the goblins, but there were 2 guards at the entrance. Leica stood a little to see the goblins clearly, and she was scared since this was the first she saw one. Asher then told her that she had nothing to fear about. He then summoned a weapon using his gloves while telling Leica that they should first take down the goblins that guarded the entrance. The 2 goblins were clueless. Asher then charged at one of the goblins and attacked it mercilessly. The other goblin then charged at him with its spear, but before this goblin could hit him, he hit it first in the neck. The goblin's blood splattered and it dropped to the ground. This goblin was shaking in pain. Asher at the same time noticed that his weapon was in too deep. Still, he pulled it and found out that the goblin was still breathing. He then stood and called Leica. Leica then asked him why, but she got dumbfounded the moment he heard Asher commanding her to personally kill the goblin. This is practice for the real thing. You need to know what it feels like to end a life, Asher stated while stomping his foot on the goblin's chest. Leica held Asher's weapon. Her hands were trembling while aiming the weapon on the goblin. She was hesitant, making her whole body shake. She closed her eyes. She was sweating, but then she followed Asher's command. After eliminating the 2 goblins, they then checked the base and saw lots of the goblins minding their own business. There were goblins eating dead wolf. Asher then explained to Leica that goblins are savage, unintelligent, and terrible fighters, but they are quite aggressive and dangerous when swarming. Leica then said that goblins are more fragile than she thought. She sees the goblins as a threat to their territory, so she tells Asher that they shouldn't let these goblins go. At this time, Asher was staring at her, realizing that this young lady showed no signs of shock upon killing her first monster, which means she had a strong spirit. Are you going to charge in and wipe them all out? Leica asked. Asher then told her to wait for a moment as he was waiting for the time of the goblins to sleep. He knew that goblins would enter their huts and wouldn't leave for the night. Goblins are known for their short but deep sleep, so he was planning to use the opportunity to sneak in through their blind spots. Leica was very curious how Asher knew so much, and a part of her believed that Asher might have fought a goblin before. Meanwhile, the goblins finally entered their huts. There was one goblin guarding their base without knowing that Asher was behind him. Asher was holding a weapon and immediately attacked the goblin without any hesitation. As he entered to one of the goblin huts, he found many of them peacefully sleeping like babies. He walked toward the goblins and started to attack them one by one. He was aware that what he was doing right now was very cruel, but then he could not deny the fact that these goblins were putting the humans in danger. After a few minutes, he eliminated all the goblins in the first hut, and there were only 2 remaining huts left. One hut caught his attention. It is because it looked like it was human-made, and he then concluded that it might be the hut of the leader. Asher then walked towards the hut while remembering that goblins are barbaric and don't have the technology to build such a house nor the intelligence to recognize hierarchy, as they are just lowly monsters with nothing but instinct. For now, he wanted to get rid first of the goblin inside this hut. For him, goblins were just stupid creatures, and he concluded that this hut was an abandoned house. As he walked forward, he stomped a rope and he immediately stopped as he heard a noise. He then found out that it was a trap. He was dumbfounded as he never thought goblins could set a trap. At this time, Leica was waiting for him. She was worried since it's getting late already, but he still hadn't come back. She regrets not following him since she was told to wait. She then turned around as he heard someone coming. But then, it turned out that it was goblins. She stood, and despite the fact that she was nervous, she composed herself for her to calm down. She was determined to win against these few goblins, so she immediately grabbed her sword. She positioned herself and challenged the goblins to come forward. But then, there was a huge goblin that suddenly came, so the 3 goblins kneeled down to pay respect. Stand back. It's a human. Looks like a proper test, the huge goblin said. Leica was terrified again, as she never imagined herself seeing a big goblin, and what surprised her the most was hearing this huge goblin talking just like a human. Come on, human, the huge goblin said. Are you a goblin? Leica asked. The goblin slowly walked toward her and answered yes, claiming that he was the leader of all the goblins in this area. He also proudly said that he's like Leica, a warrior trained in the ways of martial arts. Leica was shocked by the fact that this goblin leader wasn't just a normal goblin, since it was a goblin with the goblin's body but had the intellect of a human. The leader goblin suddenly guffaws and asks, what does race matter when it comes to martial arts? He twirled his spear and proclaimed to stop the chit-chat. He positioned himself and then challenged Leica to have a showdown together. Still, Leica made herself believe that this leader goblin is just a lowly monster. She then confidently warned the leader goblin that he was no match for her. The goblin charged, and the same as Leica. Back inside the goblin's base, Asher was already wounded. His blood was dripping on the ground, and he was annoyed that he let his guard down. He was holding his wound to at least stop the blood from dripping. He admitted himself that he didn't realize goblins were so clever with traps, and since he triggered the traps, all the goblins woke up and surrounded him. He then summoned a weapon to fight back, and this time, it was a spear just like the weapons of the goblins. The goblins rushed toward him while screaming, but before they could hit Asher, Asher swung his spear, circled, and eliminated numerous goblins. Asher looked at the goblins, but it only made him upset seeing the goblins never stop coming. While he was fighting with the goblins, Leica was also fighting against the leader. Leica was struggling while the leader goblin still dared to smile, saying that Leica's movement wasn't bad at all. Leica grits her teeth and swings her weapon to her back, then says, why is a monster judging a human? She swung her weapon again with the intention of hitting the leader goblin, but then the leader used its spear to block her sword. Surprisingly, the leader goblin managed to block Leica's attack with so much ease. The leader goblin suddenly jumped to avoid Leica's sword. He then told Leica that she was using too much strength but her movements were unstable. He then landed back on the ground while Leica thought that this leader goblin must be on the same level as Asher. She also wondered how this goblin knew so much about swordsmanship. I'm sure that's not all there is to it. Show me more of your skills, human, the leader goblin stated. Leica then becomes very determined to give what the leader goblin wants. She then charged at the leader goblin using her Revenia's sword technique. Take this, she uttered. She was about to hit the leader goblin, but then the leader was calmed and proclaimed that she was also a fake. Leica is flustered, which is why the leader goblin gets a chance to block her sword and break it. Leica was puzzled knowing that she was now doomed. The aura of the leader goblin changed while telling Leica that they should get this over. He charged at Leica, then attacked her without any hesitation. Leica then flew away, and Asher at the same time finished eliminating the goblins surrounding him. I can't believe that these goblins did this, he uttered while walking away. He was holding his painful wound while realizing that goblins have a habit of coating their weapons with poison. A small amount of their poison is enough to kill hundreds of humans. He feels severe pain. He kneeled on the ground saying that he was going to die at this rate. He fell on the ground the same as Leica. Leica was moaning in pain, so the leader goblin noticed that she was still alive. You're lucky, that armor has saved you, the leader goblin said. At this time, Leica could not move even if she tried. The leader goblin was smiling at her and told her to die with honor as a warrior. He grabbed his spear and walked toward Leica. Leica's tears drop as she believes that she's going to die. Luckily, someone interfered by deflecting the leader goblin's weapon using a spear. The leader looked in the direction where the weapon was coming. Leica did the same thing and she was surprised to see Asher. The leader goblin was smiling while saying at Asher and proclaimed that Asher is really a brave human. Asher also smiled at him, and they looked at each other's eyes. Leica also stares at Asher. She uttered Asher's name while the leader goblin at the same said, "You're still alive, human." Asher was shocked as he never thought a goblin could speak like a human. "I've taken on the habits of your goblins," he said. Asher informed the leader goblin that he was familiar with the goblins' trick of poisoning their weapons. He coated his weapons with an antidote so he could survive. That kind of preparation is essential when fighting goblins according to him. The leader goblin smiled as it gave him interest knowing that Asher knew their tactics. "You're a clever human," he uttered while looking at Asher, who assisted Leica to lean on the tree. Asher told the lady to stay on the tree while he dealt with the leader goblin. Leica then told her to be careful. Asher then stares at the goblins. He approached the leader and asked if he was really the leader of all the goblins in the area. The leader goblin then replied yes, and he mentioned his name, which is Tarkin, an aspiring martial artist. Asher was speechless. He was just thinking that Tarkin is indeed a goblin with the body and mind of a human. And for him, Tarkin is such an interesting creature. Tarkin suddenly pointed his spear at Asher while accusing Asher of being guilty of interfering with a fair duel. "Are you ready for the consequences?" Tarkin asked, and Asher then challenged him to come and fight. Asher summoned a sword while Tarkin charged at him. Tarkin tried to attack him, but Asher blocked his spear. Still, Tarkin tried many times and Asher did the same thing. While receiving attacks from Tarkin, Asher found out that these attacks aren't just ordinary goblin attacks. Tarkin doesn't only use brute force, methodical movements, honed by countless hours of training and practice. He smiled thinking that it had been a long time. It has been a while since he has faced a proper opponent like this. As he saw an opening, he lifted his sword with a slight smile on his face and swung it with force. Tarkin split away, but instead of being worried, he got challenged, saying that this was the perfect swordplay he had always wanted. He admitted that Asher is indeed a strong human, and with that, he claimed this day as his lucky day. He was satisfied meeting two decent humans. He then screamed, "Let's fight seriously." He then charged at Asher once more while Asher did the same thing. At the same time, Leica was moaning in pain, but despite struggling, she still forced herself to witness how Asher fought with Tarkin. From what she observed, Tarkin is monotonous with no finesse or skill, but has perfect spear movement. While watching the battle between Tarkin and Asher, she could confirm that Tarkin really looks eerily similar to Asher. Unfortunately, she cannot be able to witness the victor anymore since she passed out all of a sudden. "What, human? Are you tired already?" Tarkin asked. Asher then casually told Tarkin that he couldn't afford to chit-chat with him right now. At this time, Tarkin believes that Asher thinks he's gonna let him get away. Asher becomes serious, claiming that he knows Tarkin will get him away. Tarkin was dumbfounded the moment he heard something explode from his territory, and when he turned around, he witnessed his village burning to ashes. He then realizes that Asher intentionally set their village on fire. "Don't you know I should exterminate you by any means necessary?" Asher said, and Tarkin then replied that he had no choice. He won't allow his people to burn to death, so he decides to let go of Asher, and promises to finish their battle another day. "We'll meet again soon, human," he uttered. Asher just stares at him walking back to his territory. Tarkin and his few minions rushed back hoping to save their race. Asher then walked toward Leica and found out that the lady fainted. He feels pity for Leica, but he was so proud of her for holding up well for basically fighting a Superman. He then carried Leica on his back while planning to go back to their base and tell everyone about the goblins nearby attacking the estate. Meanwhile, he arrived at the Lord's castle. Karos was also here commanding his men to secure the castle. He then turned his head around as he heard someone call his name. "Let us in, please," Asher said. Karos was shocked the moment he saw the unconscious lady carried by Asher. He then ordered his men to carry the lady back to her room to be treated. He approached Asher with a mad tone as he thought that it was Asher who hurt the lady. "What did you do to her?" he asked. Asher then calmly replied that he didn't have time to explain everything. For him, it is better to show it to Karos. He was holding a sack and dropped it on the ground while telling Karos to take a look at it. Karos was dumbfounded upon seeing a cut head of a goblin. "Is this the first time you're seeing one in person?" Asher asked. But then, Karos didn't reply, and the men behind him felt disgusted. Asher then informed them that goblins were the ones planning to attack Alak territory. "Did you say attack?" Karos asked in disbelief. Asher then told them that the goblins would arrive soon, so they had to prepare for the war right away. The next day early in the morning, Leica woke up upon hearing the birds chirping. She slowly opened her eyes and first saw her father and mother with so much worry for her. Her mother uttered her name and asked how she felt. Leica then rises. She smiled widely and told her mother not to worry too much since she was fine. "Leica, was Asher the one who took you out?" Leberok asked. He trembled in anger, questioning how Asher dared to drag Leica into danger. Leica then told him that it was not Asher's fault. She admitted that she was the one who wanted to follow Asher. She followed him even though Asher had already said it was dangerous. But she was thankful for that since it was the reason why she gained real combat experience and built mental strength. In addition, Asher saved her when she fought against the goblin. She was smiling while telling her father that Asher was fighting for his life as well as for the sake of Alak territory. From trembling hands, Leberok became calm upon hearing Leica's statement. "Is that so?" he said. Deep inside, he agreed with his daughter, knowing that Asher went personally to the goblins' territory while everyone in the Alak territory was filled with fear and anxiety, and even brought the goblin's head back. By that, he could say that Asher is no different from a hero. Right now, the goblin's head was hanging at the training ground of the soldiers. While the men were practicing, Asher was watching. He then heard a voice telling him that he was the one ordering the men to hang the goblin's head on the training ground. As Asher checked who it was, he found out it was Leberok. Leberok believes that the soldiers can get rid of their fear and raise their guard while looking at the goblin's head during their training time. Leberok stood beside Asher and asked Asher's opinion about their soldiers. Asher then replied that their soldiers were fine and they might have a huge chance of winning. "Thank you, Asher. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart as the Lord of the Alak estate," Leberok stated. Asher was surprised, wondering if he now gained the trust of Leberok. "You're giving me too much credit, my lord," he replied. He then asked about Leica, and Leberok then said that Leica goes to her training ground to practice the moment she wakes up. Leberok and Asher went together to Leica. Leberok said that Leica could comfortably live but still chose to put herself through hardship. Leica then stopped swinging her sword the moment she saw her father and Asher. Leberok then asked her if she was fine, and she confidently said yes and proudly stated that she could handle much. Leberok said that Leica is just as troublesome as Luke. "Sheesh, it's disappointing to be compared to my brother," Leica replied. Leica looked straight to the window of Luke's room and said that Luke was such a nuisance and was always hiding in his room. She wants to become stronger in place of her brother. Asher also stares at the window of Luke's room, and he wonders if Luke gets traumatized after the day he teaches him a lesson. For him, Luke is really weak, and he guessed he needed to help Luke come to his senses. "Hey, Asher, your right arm, are you hurt?" Bateria asked. Asher then politely replied that he was fine since it was just stung a little from the goblin's poison. Bateria got worried upon hearing that he was poisoned. Leica then told her that it was okay since Asher healed it right away as he was well prepared. As per Asher, goblins have a habit of coating their weapons with deadly poison, so they should prepare for that. Leberok was grateful that he mentioned it, and he informed Asher that he would tell about it to Karon right away. Asher was very confident of winning the battle against the goblins since they had the armor and medication ready. But he has one problem. That is the goblin leader who possesses human-like physical and martial skills, and knowing that Tarkin is indeed strong, he wants to be the one who should face him. Since the goblins' base burned to ashes, they end up temporarily living in a cave. Lucky for them, lots of them remained alive. While the goblins were busy with their own businesses, Tarkin was sitting on his temporary throne. He was spilling water on his shell glass while thinking that in a race of innately weak and possessing low intelligence, he wanted to become stronger. He has attained intelligence and a physique that has surpassed the limits of goblins. With this power, he was confident that he could defend his race. As he drank the water, he suddenly heard a voice telling him to kill the humans. His shell glass shattered as he fell it to the ground. He suddenly felt a severe headache, and he knew it was a curse. He continued to hear the voice telling him the same words. He was mad, questioning why he had to suffer just to gain some intelligence if in the end he is still just a puppet who simply follows orders. He started to cry, and he made himself believe that he got something because of the suffering he felt. For him, his world is full of fakes. He remembered Asher. He cannot forget him since it was the first time he met a man like him. He smashed his spear on the ground and called everyone's attention. All of his minions gathered in front of him, and he then said, "Everyone, let's go. Let's get rid of humans." Meanwhile, he and his minions reached the Alak territory, and all of them were ready to attack the castle with the intention of killing everyone. All the goblins charged while screaming, and the soldiers above the castle then declared that the goblins had come. Karos then commanded all the soldiers to raise their weapons. All the soldiers screamed and prepared for the battle. "This is our land. Don't let those monsters run away. Kill them all." Karos screamed. The goblins climbed on the wall and started attacking the soldiers. Fortunately, the soldiers were now less scared of the goblins. Blood splattered. Soldiers were able to kill the goblins. Karos also fought with his weapon. And at the same time, Leberok commanded the men with him to stop the goblins and protect their Alak territory. While they were busy dealing with goblins, Luke was still hiding inside his room, covering his ears, shivering in fear upon hearing that their territory was being attacked by goblins. He suddenly heard someone calling his name. He got startled. He screamed in fear and rose the moment he saw Asher. Asher told him to come to his senses. He informed Luke that everyone inside the castle now was fighting with the goblins. Luke still trembles while admitting that he can't do anything. "How can I help in this fight?" he asked. He started to cry, saying that he was not as strong as Asher and Leica. For him, he is just a good-for-nothing coward who will only be the successor of Alak territory in name. Asher was worried for Luke, knowing that Luke's self-esteem had fallen to the ground. He believes that Luke needed to strengthen his heart. He summoned a sword and struck it near Luke's foot. Luke was terrified, but then Asher told him to take the sword with him. "You can't fight, and now you're trying to run away. Are you still not going to do anything? Even if the land burns and people die, how can a coward like you become the lord of this land?" Asher stated. Luke was dumbfounded. He cannot utter any words. He then heard Asher continue telling him that he's the one who will become the lord of this land, which is why he should fulfill his duty. While telling it, Asher walked away, leaving Luke staring at the sword. Luke gulped without any words coming out of his mouth. He grits his teeth out of anger against himself. He grabbed the sword and finally decided to join the battle. At this time, lots of goblins coming as per Karos. 2 goblins heading to him together, and he wasn't prepared, so he panicked a little. Luckily, someone attacked the goblins. It was Leica. Leica killed both goblins without any hesitation. Karos then asked her if she was fine, and the lady then assured him that she was now healthy. Leica then asked Karos about the situation of the battle, and Karos replied that they definitely have the upper hand at the moment. The number of the goblins is large, but their power and coordination are poor. The soldiers of the Alak territory are sufficiently defending themselves. At this rate, Karos was sure that they would be victorious. Leica wasn't confident at all, knowing that they still had a long way to go, and she knew that the really dangerous one had still not come. After a few minutes, more goblins died at the hands of the Alak soldiers. The soldiers didn't let any goblins reach the top of the wall and enter the castle. Tarkin was standing outside and confirmed that it was really impossible to let his minions to take over the castle. Still, he was glad that his minions did a great job of facing the humans bravely. Right now, he proclaimed that he would come forward himself and take over the battle. No more goblins climbed the wall, so the soldiers got a chance to rest for a while. But, of course, Karos reminded them to keep their guard up, and he commanded the others to pick up the wounded soldiers. The soldiers were so happy since none of them died and some only gained small wounds. They were expecting that it was now humanity's victory, without knowing that the leader of all goblins charged toward them with killing intent. As they felt someone coming, they then looked and were dumbfounded to see a human-like goblin. Leica and Karos were also shocked upon seeing Tarkin. "You let your guards down, you pathetic humans," Tarkin said, and instantly eliminated numerous soldiers. "What is that? Is that also a goblin?" Karos asked. Leica didn't respond since she was shocked that the leader of all goblins had come too early. The soldiers surrounded Tarkin, and they were confused if Tarkin was also a goblin. They also believed that Tarkin is a fearless guy for jumping into the battlefield by himself. Karos then commanded his men to attack, but then Leica told him no, and informed him that Tarkin was dangerous. Karos was confused. He was staring at the lady without knowing that his men charged at Tarkin to follow his command. "I don't have time to play with you guys. All of you are fakes," Tarkin proclaimed, then continued to attack more soldiers. Numerous soldiers flew away upon receiving damage from Tarkin. Tarkin headed his way to Karos and Leica. Karos was dumbfounded, and Tarkin at the same time stopped running as he realized that the lady right in front of him was the woman he met in the forest. He then concludes that the guy next to Leica was the leader of the soldiers. "What a pity, I have no business with fakes like you," he added. Leica was shaking, and she was stuttering. They both then heard Tarkin telling them to bring the human to him. Karos was confused at first, but then a part of him believed that Tarkin was referring to Asher. Tarkin then said that he wanted to face the real man who could wield a sword. "A human named Asher, bring him to me," he added while walking slowly toward Garen. "I'm afraid you won't be meeting Asher, Goblin. Unless you kill me first, that is," Garen replied confidently. He prepared himself to fight, but then Leica won't allow him, knowing that Tarkin is a dangerous goblin. Karos then told the lady not to worry as he was confident that he could handle Tarkin by himself. For him, Tarkin is just a mere goblin, and he believes that no goblin can surpass the swordsmanship of a human. "Good luck to you, now, bring it on," Tarok uttered with a smile on his face. He also positioned himself to fight, and Karos then charged at him with a scream. Karos tried to attack, but Tarkin managed to block his weapon. "I'll bring home your head," Garen said, and Tarkin then challenged him to attack with all his might. Every time Karos attacked Tarkin, Tarkin always blocked his weapon and didn't even harm Tarkin. Garen is a swordsman of the highest caliber and was recognized even within the Empire, if not even with his swordsmanship. Leica concludes that the goblin takes it like he's dealing with an inexperienced child. Tarkin was challenged to fight against Garen, and he even admitted that Garen really had the qualities of a warrior. But unfortunately, Garen unintentionally lets go of his sword after Tarkin hits it. Karos was dumbfounded, but before he could do anything, Tarkin attacked him with the spear, causing him to fly away. Leica panicked. Garen at the same time slammed on the ground with a destroyed armor. Tarkin pointed his sword at Garen's face and said, "You two are a fraud who relies on false tricks." He was smiling, planning to eliminate Garen so he could finally see Asher again. Leica then immediately plans to stop Tarkin. She uttered Karos' name and prepared her sword. But then Asher finally came and called Tarkin. Tarkin then laughed in satisfaction upon seeing Asher. "I've been waiting for you, human," he said. And Asher then responded, "So have I, Goblin. I'm not done with you just yet." Asher then summoned a sword and challenged Tarkin to continue their fight. Tarkin then told him that his human swordsmanship was no match for him. "There is only one human worth fighting. Asher, you're the sole chosen one," he added. He then attacked Asher with his spear, but of course, Asher immediately blocked it. Asher swung his weapon. Tarkin then smiled as he felt excited seeing the swordsmanship he had been looking for from Asher. For him, it is now a battle of straight-up pure skill. They continue fighting while Leica goes to Garen and asks him if he's still fine. Garen then told her not to worry as he only got a minor injury from the goblin. At this time, Luke suddenly rushed to them with a worried expression. Both were surprised that he came, but they were also worried for Luke, knowing that Luke doesn't have the ability to fight bravely. Garen then told Luke to stay inside, knowing that it was very dangerous for him outside. "I am the heir. I can't simply stand still. I may not be able to fight, but I will be with you on the battlefield," Luke said. Upon hearing his sincere statement, Leica suddenly smiled slightly, thinking that her brother finally come to his senses. Luke then looked at the direction of Asher, and Leica informed him that Asher was fighting the goblin leader. Luke was staring still and uttered Asher's name as he was surprised to see Asher's unbelievable movement that matched the goblin. Tarkin laughed, saying that it is so amusing fighting someone for real instead of fighting against those fakes. "I've been meaning to ask you this for a while. What the hell do you mean by fake, Goblin?" Asher asked. "Their swordsmanship is fake. Humans honor heroes with false power. How is the swordsmanship of such beings not fake?" Tarkin replied. Asher was dumbfounded upon hearing from Tarkin that humans have false powers. He then suddenly recalled the heroes long ago while thinking if those heroes said to be beyond human power were fake. Tarkin pointed his spear at Asher while proclaiming that Asher is a different human. For him, Asher is the same as him who attained the purest form of swordsmanship. and he believes that Asher is the only human who is worth fighting. He then charged at Asher once again, but Asher was so clueless and still confused. He blocks Tarkin's weapon while thinking that his imperial swordsmanship was real while those heroes' swordsmanship were fake, which he could not believe. He suddenly smiled and caught Tarkin's weapon while believing that Tarkin was spitting bullshit. "Goblin, you're pretty smart, I can see it," he said, but Tarkin was confused about what he was implying to say. Asher becomes serious and asks Tarkin how he dared to judge human swordsmanship. Asher knew that swordsmanship was meant to transcend human limitations. Heroes save the world using their power, and no human can reach a higher level than the one heroes have reached. He even believes that he's not also a true swordsman yet, as he died as soon as he reached the level he had longed for all his life. For him, he's just an old swordsman who only knows the imperial sword technique. "To a barbaric race like yours, my swordsmanship must be considered advanced," he uttered. He pushed Tarkin's spear and said that Tarkin didn't know humanity's true limit nor how powerful they were. He raised his sword and attacked Tarkin without any hesitation. Tarkin fell to the ground with his blood splattered. Asher looked straight at him and called him a weak goblin. Leica then proclaimed that the goblin was defeated. Her brother asked if the goblin was dead, but then Tarkin slowly moved and moaned in pain. He tried to rise despite he was shaking. Asher then calls him and says, "A little deeper and you'd have been. I won't kill you now. You'll be locked up and held accountable for what happened." Tarkin then accepted the fact that Asher won against him, so he told him to do as he pleased. Asher then said he would first ask a question. He wants to know why the goblins invaded them. And as per Tarkin, they were ordered. Asher was shocked upon hearing it. Tarkin then added that the demons were the ones who ordered him to lead his people to invade humans. Back then, there were also human invasions. Asher concludes that the invasion this time was the same as the last demon invasion. Even then, some monsters attacked humans under the command of demons. In short, the Demon King was behind all of it, and Asher concludes that the Demon King was indeed resurrected after all. Tarkin then sincerely said that he is just a mere puppet who's being controlled by a higher being. He was originally no different from any other goblin. However, he was more intelligent than most and was also able to hone his spearmanship. That's why he often fought against other races to test his skills. But nothing ever changed the fact that goblins were the lowest monsters in the power chain. No matter how hard he tried, he could not surpass the limitations of his race. Then one day, his enemy was being attacked as it turned out that a high-rank demon appeared. He gave him intellect and a superior body. In return, he gave him orders to invade the humans. But now that he has been defeated, he believes he has no excuse when he returns, and he's just looking forward to seeing what the human prisons are like. Asher unsummoned his weapon and told Tarkin that he would be escorted to the prison. 3 knights then escorted Tarkin. He was tied with a rope so he could not move, and while they were heading, the people were cheering for their victory against goblins. At this time, Leica noticed Tarkin's calmness. Asher then told her that it was because Tarkin had already accepted his defeat. Asher was staring at Tarkin thinking that they were out of danger for now, but with the resurrection of the Demon King, he's afraid it's the beginning of a much bigger crisis. The next day, the knights were repairing the damaged walls. At the same time, Asher went to Leberok's office and Leberok acknowledged his help in saving the manor from destruction. Asher then replied that he just did his part as a member of the manor. However, Leberok said it isn't the only thing he's grateful for. He mentioned that his son, Luke, has been rehabilitated, which was a good thing. Luke even volunteered to help the soldiers repair the walls. He also stated that Karon has Tarkin under his surveillance, but he feels something doesn't seem right. Asher then suggested sending Tarkin to the Empire for an investigation, and Leberok then grabbed the scroll on his table and informed Asher that he had a message from the Empire. He opened the scroll and stated that after a doppelganger and a goblin invasion, the Empire must have sensed a crisis. The Empire is sending men soon and an Imperial carriage is on its way. Meanwhile, the carriage Leberok mentioned was already nearby. There was a citizen who concluded that inside might be Haiban, but then the other guy behind him stated that such an honorable person would never come to their place. The guy in the middle then flustered. He then asked his friend if he had also seen what he had just seen. It turned out that the person inside the carriage wasn't a human. At this moment, Asher and Leica were in the training ground. Asher was practicing his imperial swordsmanship, and Leica asked him if he wanted her to learn imperial swordsmanship. However, Asher said she shouldn't practice it for some reason. Leica felt sad and said that looking at Asher, she was suddenly convinced that imperial swordsmanship was amazing. Asher then informed her that she would be disappointed once she learned it. He was sure about it, especially since there were many kids like her in his previous life. Lots of aspiring swordsmen wanted him as their teacher, but he taught them simple, repetitive sword techniques without any skill. Many left disappointed, except for solely one kid. Asher wonders how that kid is doing now. By the way, Asher, did you hear someone's coming from the Empire? Leica asked. Asher then replied yes and informed her that the Lord told him about it. But then, he was shocked when he heard from Leica that the visitor would be the captain of the guards who was a dark elf. He was dumbfounded and he was in disbelief. Right now, the visitor had arrived. Leberok was outside and welcomed her, the captain of the Empire's guards. Nice to meet you. I'm the captain of the guards, Arena Varsalis, she said. Back then, Asher burned the dark elf forests. Someone came and called him. It was Haiban and Lapinia. Haiban said that the elves burned their lives away in the end. With this, he believes that the Dark Elves are completely extinct. Asher then said that the elves brought it upon themselves. He also added that they nearly faced a world crisis because of the Elf Elder. He then turned around and walked while telling Haiban that his work had been done so he should head back to their base. He allowed both Haiban and Lapinia to call him if they needed anything from him. Haiban then waved goodbye to him and wished him to travel safely. Asher was walking alone in the forest, but then he suddenly heard someone sobbing and sniffing. He then looked around, wondering where the sound came from. At the same time, he senses that the sound is like a child crying somewhere. He followed the sound and he surprisingly saw a dark elf little girl. She was crying. She looked at Asher and Asher concluded she was the elder's child based on her attire. Asher cannot believe that the elder elf managed to save her own child somehow. He calls the child and invites her to come with him. The little elf was surprised, but she held his finger and said that her name was Arena Varsalis, and that little elf was also the current captain of the guards. Asher and Leica were also with Leberok. Leica then greeted Arena and shook hands with her. She was still surprised at this moment since she had never seen one before. Leberok then introduced Asher to Arena by saying that Asher was an excellent swordsman who greatly contributed to vanquishing the goblins. Arena stared at Asher and said, "Pleased to meet you, Sir Asher." They then shook hands and Leberok then permitted them to enter the mansion and have a chit-chat. When they arrived inside, Leberok told Arena that Asher would be the one to explain everything that had happened so far. Leberok left them, and at first, Asher felt strange since he never expected to face his adopted daughter from his past life. Arena was the sole survivor of the Dark Elves and his adopted daughter. In the past, the Darl Elder hated humans, so she tried to destroy the world. The Elder attempted to destroy the world using forbidden magic to summon monsters from another dimension. But she couldn't control the rampaging power of these creatures. The Dark Elves were completely annihilated. The Elder, absorbed by the creature, was barely stopped by the heroes. Asher burned the Dark Elf forest that had been corrupted by the creature's energy. Then he found and took in the orphaned Arena. Arena quietly followed him well but didn't give more affection than necessarily. And he, too, didn't seek affection from Arena. The humans who burned her homeland and caused her family's death was he, so he believes Arena must have resented him. Now, he was wondering why Arena walked the same path as him by becoming the captain of the guards. Asher gets back to his senses when Arena calls his attention. Arena informed him that she had come because of Haiban's request since Haiban couldn't come in person, and he also entrusted her as his proxy. Arena then said she wanted to get to the point. First, their empire does not trust Asher, so the information they must give him is a crucial secret of the empire. As per Arena, even if Asher was Lord Haiban's disciple, it is still difficult to speak freely. Asher understood her, knowing that a child who suddenly appears and knows about demons and even defeats them would be bound to be confusing from the empire's perspective. According to Arena, it is because of Asher's swordsmanship that Haiban trusted him. He then asked Asher to show her his swordsmanship as a request from the Empire. At this time, Asher was hesitant, thinking that Arena must know his swordsmanship well. Back then, Arena always watched him practice. Right now, he knew he didn't have a choice but to execute his swordsmanship. He positioned himself while Arena was on his side. Arena was staring at him, and she remembered Haiban's statement that Asher resembles her adoptive father. When Haiban said that, she wasn't convinced. Haiban then told her that the swordsmanship of Asher, the way he speaks, and even his personality are remarkably similar to her father. Since Arena doesn't want to believe it, Haiban suggests she see it herself. Arena didn't respond, but in the end, she came to Alak territory. For her, there's no way such a person who resembles her deceased father could exist in this world. "They'll begin now," Asher said. He then swung his sword and executed a strong blow. Arena was focusing on watching him, but she was dumbfounded when she confirmed that Asher's swordsmanship was really the same as her father. The next day inside Leberok's office, Leica was inside. Her father informed her that she had received an acceptance letter from the academy. Leberok was holding the letter, and according to him, the Imperial Guard captain brought the letter. Leica accepted the letter. She was thrilled while thanking her father. Leberok then told her that she would be able to further develop her talents through formal education. He also informed Leica to get ready since they would soon be heading to the capital. While Leica was heading back to her room, she was smiling since it was her dream to enter the Imperial Academy. Imperial Academy is the place that produced great sword masters and first-class swordsmen. The Empire's most prestigious school where countless swordsmen from across the Empire gather. Leica stopped walking when she suddenly remembered Asher. She was thinking that it would be great if Asher could come with her to the academy too. For her, Asher is truly the Empire's finest talent without exaggeration. She then smiled when she decided to suggest Asher go to the Empire together. She believes that Asher will probably want to experience a bigger world too. Right now, Asher was on the ground playing with his sword. At the same time, he was thinking about Arena. Last day, he showed his swordsmanship to Arena. Arena paused without realizing that Asher was done. Did you confirm it? Asher asked, which flustered Arena. Arena suddenly excused herself, but Asher understood as he believed that Arena must have been surprised seeing a child she had never met before performing her dead father's swordsmanship. While he was thinking, he sensed something was gazing at him. He then found out that Arena was standing behind him. How long have you been there? He asked. Arena was startled. She was stuttering since she didn't know what to say. She thought that she disturbed Asher, so he apologized to him, but Asher told her she didn't disturb him at all. Asher reminisces about the time before since Arena also watches him over and over again back then. Both of them decided to have a private talk. Arena gave thanks to Asher for responding to her request for a swordsmanship demonstration. She then honestly informed Asher that his swordsmanship is so similar to someone she knows that she was momentarily confused. She was guilty that she couldn't explain the situation properly, so she said sorry to him. Asher then said he was glad it wasn't anything serious. He then asked Arena if the verification to him was already completed, and Arena then replied, of course. I trust you, Sir Asher, and I'll share confidential Imperial information with you. Arena suddenly stated. According to her, many heroes protected the world in the past during the era of war, like the great mage who defeated the demon race, the hero who vanquished the demon king, Sir Valters, and Lady Lapinia. Now, these heroes are disappearing. The hero who ruled the territory suddenly vanished after destroying his domain, and in addition, Balbaka was consumed by the demon race. Among these, the situation in the north is the most severe. Due to Lady Lapinia's absence in the north, control over the region has collapsed, and monsters are invading the territory. Moreover, communication with the great mages and the dragon slayers' castles has been cut off. In short, the world is in utter chaos right now. Asher was silent upon hearing it, but this is what he already expected. He asked about Haiban, and Arena informed him that Haiban left the Empire. There was an imperial order to find the whereabouts of the heroes and observe the world's crisis. Before he left, he asked Arena to relay the current situation to Asher. Honestly, Haiban was looking forward to seeing Asher's decision if he would also like to join in saving the world. Asher knew that Haiban wanted him to fight together against the crisis like back then. He slowly talks, telling Arena that he won't do anything. Arena was shocked as she never thought Asher would refuse to help them. Asher then said that he didn't want to waste his time on such honorable pursuits. Asher sees himself as not a hero who only desires the path of the sword. That is also how it was during the war, and he concludes that is how it will be from now on. He was determined to live by wielding his sword. He have never aspired to be a grand hero, and he was sure he never will. He will only cut down those who stand in his way. Arena was speechless, but then she respected Asher's decision. She walked away and proclaimed, Sir Haiban said you are someone who never changes. He said you'd spend your whole life wielding a sword. In that aspect, you're very similar to someone I know. Asher was out of words. He was just staring at Arena, but Arena looked at him back and asked about his plans from now on. Asher then replied that he was going to the Gate of Swords. Arena was shocked and asked Asher to repeat what he said. Asher then sincerely stated that he planned to visit the Gate of Swords in the Empire. He wanted to know the secret of his reincarnation. If the guy in his mind was there, he concludes that that guy might be able to answer his question. Arena then asked the reason why he wanted to go there, but before he could answer, Leica came and called him. Leica excitedly showed the letter to Asher while informing him that it was an acceptance letter from the Imperial Academy, and she invited her to come with her. Both Asher and Arena were shocked. Arena then smiled and said, This works out well, Sir Asher. How about accompanying us to the Empire? Asher crossed his arms while thinking. After a few seconds, he agreed with Arena, thinking that it might be nice to spend this last bit of time with Leica since he's planning to say goodbye to her soon. Leica's departure to the Empire to enter the Academy was decided. A welcoming crowd gathered to bless the young lady's future. Leica's parents see her before leaving. Her mother was sad and at the same time happy for her. Leverok then also told her not to worry about their territory since Karon and Luke would be protecting it. He was hoping that Leica, his daughter, would become the Empire's finest swordsman. Her mother then also told Asher that Leica would be lonely living away from home, so she wants Asher to stay by Leica's side and return together. Asher then said yes, he will escort Leica to the Empire as Leica's guard knight and companion. However, he's not sure if he will be able to return to Alak territory. He was still confused about the reason why he was reborn and why God was targeting him. He also wondered about his comrades' whereabouts. In addition, he wanted to know how the demon race revived. Countless questions endlessly torment his mind, so he plans to leave in search of answers. He didn't want to do anything, but he knew these questions would block his path forward, so he must resolve them himself. Thank you for your hard work, and have a safe journey, Imperial Guard Captain, Lebrok said to Arena. Arena shook hands with him and gave thanks for his hospitality. Lebrok also hands over the goblin as per the Empire's request. Tarkin was inside the prison staring at Arena. Arena approached him by informing him that he will be detained in the Empire's prison for life once the investigation was over. What choice does a loser like me have? Do as you please, Tarkin replied. After a few minutes, everyone entered the carriage and headed their way. The people outside were cheering for the Alak territory. This time, they saw a goblin for the first time. They call him a disgusting creature and wish him to rot in prison for life. Tarkin just chuckled and said that it wouldn't be easy to be detained in the Empire, but he was positive that he would surely be free. While on their way, Leica decided to ask a question to Arena. She wants to know how Arena becomes the Imperial Guard Captain. She concludes that it must have been difficult to adapt to the human world as a dark elf. Arena doesn't feel uncomfortable with the question. She proudly replied that the reason she became Imperial Guard was to follow the path of someone she respected. Asher was speechless as he was touched by Arena's words. Leica at the same time asked Arena who that person was. Arena then replied that it was a father-like figure who raised her. According to Arena, dark elves have long hated humans. Ariana too was taught that way. But after her race was destroyed, there was one human who reached out to her, the sole survivor. She felt a warm presence without any wariness or hostility. That person was the Imperial Guard Captain. He took her in and raised her like his own daughter. Although he was stern on the outside, he was deep and caring inside. His self-disciplined demeanor was an inspiration to her as a child. Leica was surprised that Arena was following her father's path, and she wondered where the Imperial Guard Captain was now. Arena then sadly informed her that her father already passed away. She touched her chest and stated that his father's image remains in her heart. Then, the person you mentioned before who resembles me, is it your father? Asher asked with crossed arms. Arena then replied yes, and Asher asked her what aspect she respected about her father. Arena closes her eyes and thinks of her father's swordsmanship. As per Arena, although her father wasn't called a hero, through lifelong training, he reached another level of swordsmanship. Arena respected and wanted to emulate that aspect of her father, and by following her father's swordsmanship, she was able to reach this position. Asher was speechless as he didn't know he would inspire Arena despite that he deliberately kept his distance. He was worried back then that Arena might resent him, but she thought of him as her benefactor. Leica then suddenly asked once more if Arena's father was really similar to Asher, and Arena then said yes. Leica then said that it surely isn't reincarnation. The moment she said that, someone screamed for help. It was a bleeding man on the road begging them to help him. He said he was from a nearby village that was attacked by bandits. He was shaking in pain. He was stuttering while saying that bandits were raiding the village and kidnapping people. Leica, Asher, and Arena were shocked upon hearing it. Asher suddenly gets off from the carriage and runs. The ladies call his name, but he never stops running while telling them that he will check it out. Leica decided to follow Asher, so she told Arena to stay inside the carriage. When she left, Arena assisted the wounded man. She then asked some of her guards to turn the carriage towards the village and some should stay to look after the wounded guy. Arena was checking the guy's wound, but then Tarkin behind her said that the wounds weren't made by human bandits but by demons. Arena was shocked upon hearing it. Tarkin then informed her that he could feel a familiar aura, and now the aura he senses came from the aura of demons. He warned Arena to be careful, and Arena was dumbfounded with what she just heard from Tarkin. At the same time, Asher and Leica reached the village and they witnessed a bloody place full of dead people. Who on earth would do such a thing? Leica asked. They both were startled when they heard someone speaking. They then saw the attackers loading up the men they kidnapped. One of them then noticed someone behind him. It was Asher. Asher attacked him without any words. Asher unalived him and the other men caught Asher's attention. Leica panicked when she saw the enemies surrounding them. She then asked Asher if these enemies were bandits, and Asher replied that these men were slave traders. The men were shocked by the fact that Asher had an idea about them. As per Asher, slave traders are a criminal organization that kidnaps people and sells them to nearby continents. Asher has dealt with them several times in his past life. He knew that slave traders from the northwestern continent where slavery was tacitly allowed. Leica was mad and said that these enemies did such inhumane acts. Asher then added that buying and selling humans is punishable by death. That also means he can execute all these guys right here and now. He then started to attack them and Leica helped him. The guys were moaning in pain and weren't able to fight back. "You're disgusting creatures," Asher uttered and stabbed one enemy. After just a few minutes, the fight ended. Citizens who were still alive then came out to show their appreciation. Leica then told them that it was fortunate that they were passing by from this village. Asher then turned his head around as he heard someone calling them. It was Arena. Arena asked if they were fine and Leica just smiled upon seeing her. Asher then informed her that the residents in this village had lost their homes, and he suggested taking them to the Empire for help. The residents were pitiful because of what happened. Lucky for them, Arena agreed with Asher's suggestion. Arena told them that she would arrange accommodation for them all in the Empire until their village was restored. The residents were so grateful and none of them disagreed with leaving the village temporarily. Leica then assisted them back to the carriage. Asher remained standing, but he heard someone from behind calling him brother. It was a kid. The kid sincerely thanked Asher for saving them. Asher then patted the kid's head and replied that he only did what had to be done. At the same time, he was annoyed by the fact that the slave traders were also trying to kidnap even young children, which could have been disastrous. As he was patting the kid's head, he noticed something. There was a mark on the kid's head. This mark is familiar to Asher, but he never says such a thing. They just headed to the carriage and Asher then told Arena that he would like to have a word with her. At this moment, he also asked Arena if Lord Crocus was the master of the depths of the Empire. Arena was shocked with his question, and she asked Asher how he knew about it. Asher then said he heard it from Haiban. He also mentioned the mark on the kid's forehead and he proclaimed it was proof that this kid is the successor of the Master of the Depths. Master of the Depths, the one called the Underground Hero. In the Empire's underground, there is a rift in the demon realm that was once an invasion route for demon kind. Because the demon realm's waves could threaten the surface if they burst out, the Master of the Depths played the key role of blocking the rift with barrier magic. One who protects the world in secret. However, he's also an unfortunate hero who must live alone in the underground darkness for his entire life. There was someone like that in the Empire, Leica asked in disbelief. Arena then told her she was right, and she stated that due to security issues, it wasn't made known to the outside. But Lord Crocus is also one of the great heroes and the one who blocks the demon realm's waves at the boundary between the demon realm and the surface. While they were talking, Tarkin was listening to them and he smiled that he unexpectedly got another information. He then realizes that the demonic energy he felt earlier came from the kid who had a mark, and he could say that this kid was destined to live surrounded by the air of the demon realm for life. There are many interesting humans, he uttered and chuckled. Hearing about the air of the demon realm feels nostalgic for him. At this time, they continue their travel heading to the Empire. Inside the carriage of Arena is also where the kid was riding. She asked his name and the kid replied that he was Garen. According to Garen, he was on his last vacation before the succession ceremony for the Master of the Depths. He stopped by the village on his way back to the Empire when suddenly slave traders barged in and captured him. Asher then told Garen he was lucky that he was saved now. Leica then also concludes that the job as the Master of the Depths is tough, knowing that he will be living underground for his whole life. Garen then said it was fine for him since life outside would be harder. Garen was an orphan. He would beg during the day. At night, he would sneak into the forbidden underground tunnels to sleep. But that place was actually a passage leading to Lord Crocus's dwelling. As it turned out, that place was full of demon realm energy, so ordinary humans couldn't enter. After that, he stayed with Lord Crocus, the Master of the Depths, as his mentor. A few years later, his master offered him the position of successor to the Master of the Depths. His master told him that he had the power to withstand the demon realm's energy and control the barrier magic. And since he was old and wanted to rest, he wanted Garen to become his successor. Garen had nowhere else to go, and he respected his master, so he agreed to become the successor. Leica was smiling upon knowing Garen's story, and she was impressed since she believes Garen must have been having a hard time making a decision. Garen then informed them that he would meet his master and undergo the successor ceremony once they arrived at the Empire. Asher was looking forward to seeing Crocus. He still remembered that in their youth, they served together in the Alak territory, and Asher hadn't seen Crocus since he went to the Empire to receive the succession ceremony. Now, he concludes that Crocus must have aged a lot by now. The night came, and they finally arrived at the Empire. The security chief then welcomed Arena, and she then informed them that the people with her were the residents whose slave traders attacked, and she asked them to prepare a temporary accommodation for these people. Before they parted ways, Garen thanked Asher and Leica. He then waved goodbye to them and informed them that he would see them before going underground. Leica waved back at him and told him to be careful on his way. Asher and Leica then heard Arena calling them. Arena thanked them for their hard work, and since it was already late, she decided to guide them to the Empire tomorrow. She then smiled and informed them that she would show them their lodgings. She sent them to their rooms, and when Asher had his alone time, he recalled his past life, remembering that this dormitory was from when he worked in the Empire. He noticed that there were no changes at all. He sat on the bed and said, "Why don't you come out already?" He senses that Caius, the assassin, is following him. Caius then showed up while saying that Asher's perception was as sharp as ever. Caius crossed his arms and chuckled. Asher then asked him if he found out any information regarding the whereabouts of the heroes he requested. Caius then said of course. He had a scroll in his hand and he stated that it was a copy of the Empire's confidential document. It contains the time when the heroes disappeared and the locations of their territories. He then throws it to Asher, telling him to use it as a reference. Other than that, Caius also told Asher that the atmosphere in the Imperial Castle has been quite ominous lately, and he heard that the Master of the Underworld had suddenly disappeared. Asher was shocked upon hearing it. The next day, Asher and Leica had their breakfast early in the morning. While eating, Leica mentioned that she didn't see Arena around and that she was hoping to have dinner with Arena together. Asher wasn't responding. Leica then reminded her that Arena said she would guide them to the Empire today. At this moment, a security came and greeted them. He said he was Kain, the security squad leader in charge of guiding both Asher and Leica. Leica then asked him if Arena wouldn't come, and Kain replied that Arena had to leave urgently due to some pressing matters, so he would be the one to guide them to the academy in Arena's stead. She must be busy. Well then, we're in your care, Leica replied. Asher was thinking about Arena, wondering if the lady left to look for Crocus. After their breakfast, they headed to the academy with the guidance of Kain. While on their way, Leica was looking outside and observing the capital of the Empire. She noticed that the buildings were more magnificent than their Alac territory and the people looked more glamorous. With this, she could say that big cities are really different. At the same time, Asher was still thinking about Crocus, knowing that it was because of Crocus protecting the world from the demon realm, which is why the Empire has been so peaceful this time. Moreover, with the succession ceremony of his successor coming up, there's no way he'd disappear suddenly. Now, he was thinking of what could have happened to Crocus. While thinking, Leica noticed something was troubling him. Asher then lied it was nothing, and Kain in front of him concludes that he must be feeling homesick in a foreign place. We'll arrive at the academy soon. It'll help to make sure you're not uncomfortable, Kain added. Asher then thanked him while Leica widely smiled and told him they were counting on him. They didn't know that the Empire wasn't unfamiliar to Asher at all, since it was where he spent most of his past life. Meanwhile, they arrived at the academy, and Leica was impressed by the fact that the Empire's academy was so huge, bigger than their Alac territory castle. Asher was also staring at the academy. He never forgot that this was the place where he and Haiban spent their youth. Now, he confirmed that nothing had changed. Kain then told them to follow him to the reception. As they arrived, the receptionist mentioned their names and she said she was wondering where both came from. But now she found out that they were from the territory where Karon resides. As per the receptionist, Karon is a great first-class swordsman produced by their academy. Up until now, she believes there is no one in the entire Empire who can beat Karon. Leica and Asher never responded, but Leica was smiling, knowing that the receptionist was wrong. The receptionist then informed them that they don't accept students without skills and that the entrance exam will be a sword duel. She asked Leica if she agreed, and Leica confidently said yes. The receptionist then guided them to the dueling grounds, and while on their way, Asher called Leica and informed her that he had some business to attend to, so he would be leaving for a bit. Leica then told him it would be nice if he would watch his duel. Asher then told her not to worry, as he was confident that Leica would pass the entrance examination. Leica then clenched her fist and told Asher not to worry about her, as she would do her best. Before leaving, Asher told Kain to take good care of Leica. Kain then said yes and told him to have a safe travel. Leica and Kain then continue heading their way to the dueling ground. Asher then turned around and immediately headed his way to the Gate of Sword. After a few minutes, Leica arrived at the dueling ground. She went into the middle of the ground and saw a guy holding a sword sitting. The guy asked his name and Leica then replied. The guy then informed her that he was Haiban, the teacher in charge of new students. He then warned her that he wouldn't go easy on her just because she's a noble. According to him, before the sword, all are equal. and if Leica can block his attack and land even one effective strike, she will pass. If you're ready, raise your sword, he said. Leica then followed his command. The receptionist at the same time informed Leica that Haiban is an honorary teacher from the Imperial Knights, and she also gives Leica a warning that she cannot pass Haiban's test with mediocre skills. Kain behind was aware that the Academy's entrance procedures are notoriously strict. He was wondering what Leica's skills are like. Haiban then charged at Leica with a scary look. Leica then swung her sword and her intention was to just block Haiban's attack. But surprisingly, Haiban's sword shattered and Haiban flew away. The receptionist and Kain were dumbfounded upon seeing it. Haiban slammed into the ground and he seemed to be dizzy. He was moaning in pain and Leica could not believe that she easily defeated him. She was confused as to why Haiban was so weak and she even thought Haiban was faking it. The receptionist is still in disbelief while declaring that Leica passed the entrance examination. Meanwhile, Asher arrived at his destination, the Gate of the Swords. It's a famous place sought after by swordsmen from all nations. To enter the interior of the Gate of Swords, he must pass through 3 gates. Only those with a high level of swordsmanship can open the gates. Once the gate opens, another appears. Many swordsmen have tried to open the gates to test their skills, but no one has ever entered the interior. Even top-tied swordsmen barely manage to pass through 1 gate. Even Swordmaster Haiban couldn't open the final 3rd gate. The space beyond the 3rd gate remains an eternal mystery, but still, many people tried to open it. However, they were struggling to do it. The guy who tried this time was trembling and in the end, he surrendered. His companion regretted it since he believed they were almost there. Asher then came and the guys asked him if he came to try out the Gate of Swords too. Asher then honestly said yes and one of the guys smiled as he believed it also wouldn't be easy for Asher since his companion, the guy who tried earlier, is the Academy's top student, Poitin, and he failed after an hour of trying. Asher never responded and just went straight to the door. He touched the door barehandedly and the guy concluded he wasn't a swordsman since he didn't have a sword with him. The other guys also laughed while telling Asher that the door wouldn't easily open by pushing it. Surprisingly, Asher opened the door in just a second. The 3 guys were dumbfounded. Asher entered the door and the door was closed instantly. Asher doesn't know why, but in his previous life, he easily passed through the 1st gate. Then, he passed through the 2nd gate as well. He even opened the 3rd gate, the one that even the Swordmaster couldn't open. He arrived at the unknown place beyond the 3rd gate. Back then, he was just a mere guard captain of the Empire, without any special skills or status. He still doesn't know why he was able to pass through all the gates, but he was able to meet an interesting being. "It's been a long time," he uttered while walking toward the sword he called Insir. Shockingly, the sword spoke saying, "Oh, look who it is. Isn't it the guard captain? It's been around 40 years. Asher replied. Insir, who he met and spoke with in his past life, is a transcendent being who can read human souls and levels, possessing vast knowledge. Asher concludes that the one who can answer his questions is only Insir. "But what's with your appearance, guard captain? You've suddenly become younger," Insir said. Asher then tells him that his soul is the same but he has been reincarnated into the body of a child named Asher, which is why he came to find Insir to see if Insir can help him find the reason for his reincarnation. Insir then said he would take a closer look at Asher's soul. A strong blow of wind then happened. After a minute, Insir then felt a strange feeling, and according to him, he sensed a corrupt energy within Asher's soul. He stated that there was a trance of a malevolent being that had interfered with Asher's soul. Asher was dumbfounded upon hearing it, and he concludes that might be Mariana.
Mariana is the leader of the assassin guild Motorola and the most evil of all evil gods. He had his followers invade the earldom of Ilac and tried to kill Asher. So that happened, captain of the guard, no Asher. Insir suddenly said that, confusing Asher. As per Insir, gods can interfere with human souls, and he believes Mariana is trying to steal Asher's soul. Asher was wondering why it should be his soul, and Insir then reminded him he became a swordmaster just before he died in his previous life. Those who reach the level of swordmaster experience a time when their aura and soul become one, but Asher died before having that time. His aura didn't merge with his soul. So to Mariana, Asher has the soul of a swordmaster, but Asher can't use aura, making him an easy and very desirable target. Asher crossed his arms. He was calm as he said that it doesn't mean he will be easily defeated by the Motorola Guild just because his body has changed. His curiosity was now satisfied, and he knew he needed to meet Mariana in person. He turned around and informed Insir that he would now leave. Insir seemed surprised and asked him if he would just leave like that. Asher then said he was busy and promised to stop by again when he returned to the Empire. Insir was moving. He was asking Asher to get him out, as he has been trapped in this room for decades, and it's driving him crazy. Asher then recalled that Esnir said the same thing in the past. He never forgets that he tried to pull Esnir out several times, but he failed. Insur then said that it was before, and he believes it is now different since Asher now becomes a swordmaster. He was very confident that Asher could definitely pull him out now. Asher decided to try pulling out Insur as a reward for answering his questions. He walked toward Insur and put his hands on the grip. Insur then proclaimed that he really wanted to escape this time. At this moment, Asher was speechless as it felt light for him holding Insur. He was sure it was different from before. He then started pulling Insur, and Insur said he was being pulled out. Insur was laughing as he felt excited to be finally free after a long time. A silhouette then appeared the moment Asher completely pulled out Insur from being stuck. Meanwhile, Asher went back to the academy. Leica was worried for him and asked him what he had been doing until now since he was covered in dirt. Asher slightly smiled as he replied it was nothing. He then asked Leica if she passed the academy entrance examination, and Leica proudly replied that she passed. She proclaimed that Haiban, the teacher who held her examination, looked really tough but went down after receiving one hit from her. She was relieved and confidently said that the academy wasn't as tough as she thought. Kane beside her then stated that there are really a lot of skilled people in the earldom of Ilac. Leica then bids goodbye to both Kane and Asher, informing them she's going to wash up and sleep. She also told Asher to do the same, and Asher replied understood. I'll head in as well. Please rest, Lord Asher, Kane said politely. Asher then responded, You've worked hard, Lord Kane. Kane then walked away while Asher was staring at him. It turned out that there was a cute soul in front of him. He stated that he had been here in the academy for a while, but no one seemed to have noticed this soul. So he concluded this soul was invisible to everyone except himself. This soul is none other than Insur. Insur was looking at the hallway blankly with crossed arms, and he didn't give any response to Asher. After that, they went outside to see the Empire. Insur was amazed, and Asher noticed it was his first time seeing the human world. Insur then told him that he remembered seeing it before he was sealed in the Sword's Gate. Insur also mentioned to Asher that the Sword's Gate is completely reduced to ashes. Asher then added that the shockwave at that time was very intense. Asher then added that the shockwave was intense. The Sword's Gate collapses after Asher and Esnir come out. That is the reason why Asher was full of dirt. That's to that, I'm a mess, Asher uttered. Insur then told him it was fine since he was now finally free. Right at this time, Insur suddenly senses something unpleasant. Asher was silent for a moment. After a few seconds, he then told Insur that he of course sensed it. Insur was confused. He was very curious to know what Asher meant to say. According to Asher, there's a rift leading to the demon world. Recently, the one who guards the rift, the master of the abyss, has gone missing. As a result, the barrier around the rift weakened, and the demonic energy started to sleep in. Insur then asked if the one preventing the demonic energy from spreading was gone. Asher replied yes, and stated that that guy was a hidden hero who protected the Empire, and now, he was wondering where that responsible guy went. Insur then said it was different since his feeling now isn't just a demonic energy. Asher was shocked the moment he heard from Insur that the energy he felt was the energy of black magic, the force that could destroy the world. At the same time beneath the Empire, Lady Aria was together with some other guards. She told them they were about to arrive at the master of the abyss's residence. While walking, she felt that the demonic energy was getting stronger. She then commanded everyone to stay alert and focused. The moment you let your guard down, you lose your life. She added. All of a sudden, someone attacked them, and one guard was harmed. Aria was shocked, wondering where the attack was coming from. Someone then appeared. It wasn't a human. She guffaws while staring at the harmed guard who collapsed on the ground. She stated that she wondered what it was, and only turned out it was just some human scum. Did you come to sightsee in the human world? She asked, and yes, it was really a lady demon. Back to Asher. He asked Insur once more if he could really feel the presence of the dark magic. Insur replied yes, and concluded it was the power that demons possess, the evil force that darkens the world and brings destruction. He knew someone was using dark magic to destroy the rift and spread the demon realm's influence. Asher was dumbfounded upon hearing it, as he was afraid that the underground might have already been taken over by demons. While thinking, someone suddenly screamed, asking to let him out. Insur and Asher's attention was caught. The voice was familiar to Asher. It turned out there was a kid who was begging Cain and the guards to let him out of the Empire. Cain won't allow him, knowing that there's a curfew outside the capital right now. The kid was begging, reasoning that he needed to see his master. The kid was Garen. He turned his head around as he heard Asher call his name. Asher was asking Garen what was going on, and Garen then instantly asked for help from him since his master had disappeared. Upon seeing the kid, Insur asked if Garen was the apprentice. Asher at the same time wasn't surprised by the fact that Garen had also sensed the demon realm's influence. Asher then told Cain that Garen was the successor of the Lord of the Depths. Cain was shocked upon hearing it. Asher knew it was where the captain of the guard was currently stationed, and he asked Cain to send him there together with Garen. Cain wasn't in favor of Asder's request, knowing that it was too dangerous and only a small trained force could enter due to the demon realm's influence. As per Insur, normal humans can't withstand the demon realm's influence, unlike monsters of demons, and since Asher is a human who has reached the level of training, he is sure Ash will be fine. Asher then decided to bring someone he knew who could help him, since he would surely face a monster. He immediately went to the Empire's prison. The one he was referring to was Tarkin. Tarkin was surprised that Asher went to the prison just for him. Asher then told him that if he would help with this task, he would recommend the Empire to set him free. But before that, he wants Tarkin to promise first to never harm humans again. "I'm a warrior. I swear on my warrior's honor and loyalty," Tarkin replied. Asher smiled as he was glad Tarkin gave his request. He then asked Cain politely to release the monster. Cain then instantly agreed with him. He knew it couldn't be done without the captain's approval, but he just agreed since Asher is the apprentice of the Empire-certified Swordmaster. In this station, he believes Asher is the only one they can trust. He unlocked the cell and freed Tarkin. Tarkin led the way and reached the gate. He believed the entrance to the underground that is certainly reeks of the demon realm. He then permitted both Garen and Asher to enter together, led by him. At the same time, Insur got interested in Tarkin since he never thought to meet a talking goblin. While heading underground, Garen asked Asher if he was okay. As per Garen, the demon realm's influence is getting stronger, and he concludes it must be hard to endure. Asher then replied he was perfectly fine. As expected, the real deal is different. A normal human would have gone mad from this level of exposure, Tarkin said, and he suddenly noticed something. It was Aria, and the lady elf was unconscious, and she was lying on the ground together with some other wounded guards. Upon seeing the lady, Asher immediately rushed to her. He assisted the lady to get up and asked her if she was fine. Luckily, Aria was still alive. Asher then observed the lady and was glad she wasn't seriously hurt. "How did you end up here, Lord Asher?" Aria asked. She was also surprised upon seeing Tarkin with Asher. Tarkin casually told her she looked like a mess. Aria was stuttering. She's asking Tarkin why he's here. Asher then informed Aria that Tarkin is familiar with the demon realm's influence, so he will be helpful. He also let Aria know that he and Tarkin would go check the inside together. Aria permitted them and asked him to be careful. Asher then started leaving, telling Garen to keep an eye on Aria and the soldiers. After a few minutes of walking, Tarkin senses demons nearby. He informed Azur that he could feel the power of demons. Insur was shocked by the fact that Tarkin could also sense the dark magic. As per Tarkin, the energy was familiar, and it was making him feel sick. He then realizes it was the damn dark power that brainwashed and controlled him. Right now, Asher heard something. He immediately activated his gloves and summoned a sword as he was sure someone was coming closer their way. Tarkin can also feel it, so he told Asher to get ready. The lady demon then appeared, laughing so loud like crazy. This demon was floating above them and uttered, "What are these things? Do you want to play with me again?" Asher was shocked as he confirmed it was really a demon. The demon cast a dark magic and declared to take on Asher first. She was smiling confidently, believing she could manage to go down Asher with just one blow. She then attacked Asher, and the moment her dark magic landed, a loud noise was heard by Aria and Garen. They both panicked upon hearing the dangerous sound, afraid that Asher would be harmed. Also, Gareb was worried that his master was in danger. Garen rushed, telling Aria he needed to check it himself. Aria followed him, as she also wanted to make sure Asher was fine. The Lord of the Depths senses Garen was coming. He was waiting for Garen as he decided to begin the succession ritual. Back to Asher, He swung his sword and successfully bounced back the Lady Demon's attack. He and Tarkin weren't moving for a moment, as they were staring at the demon lying on the ground wounded. The demon was moaning in pain. Asher never thought that he could end this demon with just one hit. "What's this brat?" he asked. Tarkin then replied that this demon was a pathetic low-class demon who didn't even seem worth fighting. The demon slowly rises. She was shaking in pain but still slightly smiled as she proclaimed that Asher's ability wasn't bad but wouldn't stop her. She immediately blocked her arms the moment Asher pointed his sword at her. She got scared and suddenly begged to spare her life. She kneeled on the ground and bowed. Asher then asked him whose orders brought her into this underground. The demon denied that she got an order from someone else. It's just that she only saw a rift and entered out of curiosity. Asher at this point then realizes that this demon doesn't seem like someone worth worrying about. But he concludes that the real culprit who destroyed the rift must be elsewhere. While thinking, Aria and Garen came. Asher lets his guard down without knowing that the demon sees it as an opportunity. She then summoned a huge monster and allowed it to instantly hit Asher. Asher flew away, and seeing what happened made Garen and Aria more worried. Tarkin and Insur also don't like what happened. Asher slammed into the wall and unfortunately passed out. The demon was laughing. She calls her companion as Pedro and acknowledges what it did. She then declared that one of their enemies had been taken off. She smiled while staring at Tarkin, stating that only this goblin left. Tarkin then teases her for bringing a beast along. The demon was covered with her dark aura. She then proudly said that monsters are slaves to them demons. "You know you must obey us, right? Now quickly deal with those over there," she commanded, and she was referring to both Garen and Aria. Tarkin's aura changed. He heard the demon telling him they should sweep away the human world together. The demon was dumbfounded the moment Tarkin called her a filthy scum. As per Tarkin, the demon really thinks that she can use them with her measly power. Tarkin's power was being activated. He charged at the enemies with killing intent and mercilessly hit them with his spear. Both flew away, and the blow coming from Tarkin was felt by Garen and Aria. Tarkin lands back on the ground. There was a portal appeared in front of them where the demon and the beast entered to escape. Right now, Aria woke Asher up and asked if he was fine. Asher replied yes. Insur, on the other hand, was hesitant to believe that Asher fainted earlier after receiving an attack from the beast. He proclaimed that he saw Asher block the beast's attack with his sword at the last moment, so he concludes Asher only pretended to faint because he didn't want to fight. Asher was smiling slightly. He knew that Insur was also watching how Tarkin would act without him. He then stood and said, "He didn't fall for the demon's temptations, Tarkin." Tarkin was standing still as he replied, "He did say he'd keep his word as a warrior. And I have those guys too." Asher just smiled. At the same time, Aria told them that they should not waste their time and leave the area. They went to another day, and Aria stated that this is the underground fortress where the rift is located. Before entering, Asher gives Garen an order to find Crocus while they deal with the demons. Garen replied understood, and he then opened the door. But to his surprise, he instantly saw his master Crocus sitting. "Garen, it's you. Come here," Crocus said. "What happened, master? I thought you had disappeared," Garen asked while running toward Crocus. Garen hugged Crocus tight, and Crocus then rubbed Garen's hair while apologizing to him for worrying. Asher was also glad to see Crocus again. "Oh, and that's the captain of the guard. It's been a long time," Crocus said. Aria then smiled and replied, "I'm glad you're safe, Lord Crocus." At this moment, Tarkin feels something is off, and he notices it's unnaturally calm. Aria then talked to Crocus, telling him they needed his help since the Empire was in danger because of the demonic waves. Aria kneeled in front of Crocus and told him that their Empire had faith in him. She begged her to protect the Empire from the demonic rift. Crocus was holding his mustache while thinking, but after a few seconds, he replied that he refused to help. Aria was shocked as she never thought Crocus would decline. She, Tarkin, and Asher then heard Crocus say, "A life as the master of the depths. How long must I be bound by such responsibility, trapped in this prison-like underground?" Back in the previous life, Asher and Crocus had a connection since Crocus was the squad leader, and the last time they interact is before the night Crocus had to head underground. Asher that time was reminding Crocus that once he entered, he would have to stay there for the rest of his life. Still, Crocus wanted to do it in his own while knowing that it was for the sake of the Empire. That night, Crocus proclaimed that he was proud to face his parents who were killed by the demons, and it brings him joy. His last word to Asher is to stay healthy. Now, Asher could see that Crocus has fallen so far. Shockingly, dark monsters appeared above Crocus. As per Insur, these are demon forms, creatures that exist on the border between the demon realm and the human realm. They're the primordial beings that are the source of the demon's power and bodies. Insur added that the so-called ruler of the depths had absorbed demon forms and gained the power of black magic. Crocus then commanded these demon forms to spread out. Aria panicked as there is one of these demon forms charged toward her. Luckily, Tarkin attacked this demon form before it could harm Aria. Tarkin then told Aria not to space out and raise her sword instead since Crocus is no longer a hero but a monster. Aria was shaking while slowly unleashing her sword. Asher, on the other hand, started fighting against the demon forms. But then, Tarkin told him to leave the demon forms to him and Aria and go find Garen since he saw Crocus take Garen away and disappear. Garen and Crocus hide in a black magic barrier. Inside, Crocus declared they should begin the successor ceremony. But then, Garen was hesitant and asked Crocus why he was now doing this. Crocus then replied he was now. He has been trapped underground for countless ages. The position of being the ruler of the depths belonged to him, and he's forever trapped in darkness. As per Crocus, he didn't want to pass this miserable life on to Garen. Why do you call it miserable? I decided to become the successor out of respect for you, Master. Garen replied. Crocus then said that the Empire also calls him a hero and claims to respect him, but he knows that the truth is those people despise him for spreading demonic energy and have locked him away. He was mad as it is a life worse than that of a criminal, hidden behind the title of hero. So, what's the way to escape this prison? It's to turn this world into a prison instead, Crocus shouted, which scared Garen. Now, several demon forms charged at Aria. Aria swung her sword and defeated many of them. Tarkin was watching her and acknowledged her for doing the right thing. For him, Aria is strangely similar to true swordsmanship. While Aria was fighting, she was hoping that Asher was safe. Asher was outside the black magic barrier Crocus created, and beside him was Insur. Asher was aware that the barrier was made of black magic. Insur then concludes that the barrier looks pretty solid. Asher pointed his sword to the barrier, while asking if he could break through this barrier. Insur then told him he was a swordmaster who could withstand the demon realm's waves, so it was definitely possible for him to break it. Asher then proclaimed he had to try it to confirm. The barrier shines the moment Asher hits it. Asher focused on trying to break the barrier, and while in the process, Garen was being wrapped by Crocus with a dark magic. Crocus told the kid he would infuse him with his power, a great power of the demons. Garen was in pain. He was screaming, begging Crocus not to continue his plan. Still, Crocus won't listen. He even told the kid to turn this world into the demon realm, and he will become someone not rejected by the world. He assures Garen he will become a hero right after. He casts the demon's power and asks Garen to take it. Fortunately, Asher managed to break the barrier in time and told Crocus his demon plan wouldn't happen. Asher was glad that he broke the barrier before Garen received the power of the demons. Now Crocus was staring at Asher with annoyance, asking him about his identity. Since his attention was now on Asher, Garen was freed by the dark magic. Garen fell on the ground while Crocus and Asher faced each other. I thought you were a hero, but you're worse than a demon, Asher said, which angered Crocus. Crocus told Asher not to interfere, and he attacked him with black magic. Asher destroyed it with his sword in just one hoop. Crocus attacked him once more, but Asher jumped to avoid it and pointed his sword at Crocus while he was above him. Crocus gasped while staring at Asher. Asher feels pity for Crocus, knowing he would now face a tragic death. Without any hesitation, Asher stabbed Crocus, causing the old man's blood to splatter. Asher was shocked the moment he heard someone saying, "Dying at the hands of a comrade is better. Wouldn't you agree? See you again, the unchanging one." Crocus sat on the ground while holding his wound. He calls Asher a young one and thanks him for freeing him. He said that because of Asher, he can now finally rest in peace. While talking, Asher was only staring at him without saying anything. "Before I die, I'd like to know your name," Crocus said. Asher then replied, "It's been a long time. Crocus, captain of the guards at Ilac territory." Crocus was dumbfounded upon hearing it. He lifted his head and asked Asher how he knew about it. Asher then honestly claimed he was the superior of Crocus, who is currently not in the form he remember. Now, Crocus finally realizes Asher's real identity. The rift then shrinks, and this was seen by both Tarkin and Aria. Aria then looked at Asher the moment Asher appeared. Asher walked toward them with clenched fists. Aria then asked him what happened to Crocus and Garen, but Asher was out of words as he didn't know how to explain that Crocus passed away because of him. The next day, Asher and Aria visited the grave of Crocus. Aria put a white flower on the grave while saying that Crocus' achievements in protecting the Empire must not be forgotten, even though his mind was twisted by demons. She added that they erected a monument in honor of Crocus. Asher was about to say regarding the Master of the Depths, but Aria cut his words and asked him to allow her to guide him. She stood and informed Asher that Garen wished to meet him. As they arrived, they saw Garen activate a magic circle. Garen turned his head around the moment he heard them calling his name. He was glad upon seeing both of them. Asher at the same time confirmed that Garen successfully became the successor. Garnet thanked them for coming. He then shows them the tomb of Crocus inside the underground. A moment of silence. Asher suddenly apologizes to Garen about what he did to Crocus. Garen then told him it was not his fault. He was aware that his master Crocus tried to use the power of the demon realm to destroy the world. But as far as he remembered, the current Crocus wasn't the master he once knew. Now he was very grateful that Asher had helped him regain clarity. Asher didn't respond. He recalled his last conversation with Crocus. Crocus said he thought he recognized Asher's swordsmanship, and it turned out he was right. Asher then asked the old man how someone like him ended up this way. As per Crocus, the demons exploited a moment of weakness in his heart and twisted him. He supposed he was just a weak human after all, and he always wanted to be a strong captain like Asher. After Crocus had said those words, Garen regained consciousness and rushed to him. Garen was crying. Crocus said sorry to him and declared to begin the proper succession ceremony despite that it was already late. Of course, Garen agreed knowing that Crocus was already in his right mind. Asher was standing still. Crocus then told him it was nice meeting him, but at that moment, he wanted to talk to Garen privately, so he asked Asher to leave. Asher then turned around as he replied, "Understood. Let us meet again someday." Back in the present time, Asher remained silent while thinking about it. He was staring at Garen holding the tomb of Crocus and proclaimed that it's not easy to overcome such sad feelings. The kid was trembling. Aria felt worried for him. The lady demon suddenly appeared behind Aria and Asher. She was calling her master and reported that she brought some books from her master's study. The lady demon was shocked the moment she saw both Aria and Asher. Aria at the same time was dumbfounded and immediately held her sword while telling Asher not to worry since she was willing to deal with the demon alone. However, Garen informs them that the lady demon has decided to work as his assistant. The demon then also added that she had nowhere to go since the rift was close. According to her, she was forced to hide, but she was found by Garen so quickly. Fortunately for her, Garen didn't kill her but instead took her in. This demon was treated poorly in the demon realm, which is why staying with Garen is much better for her. You're one to know gratitude. A demon but a good one, huh? Insur uttered with crossed arms. After having a conversation with Garen, Aria, and Asher bid goodbye to the kid. Asher asked the kid to come by to them sometime, and Lady Aria also told Garen to take good care of himself. Both then walked away, and while walking, Aria said to Asher that it is dangerous to make a demon as Garen's assistant no matter what. However, as per Asher, even if it did play some nasty tricks, it doesn't have strength or malice to harm people. More importantly, he believes having someone with Garen will help the kid escape loneliness and calm his heart. As they both went outside, they saw Cain with some other guards. Aria then asked Cain what was going on, and Cain then smiled as he replied that he had come just to escort Asher. He and the guards behind him kneeled in front of Asher and asked Asher to come with them. It turned out that the great emperor wished to meet him. Asher went to the emperor by the lead of Cain. He then politely greeted the emperor and stared at him as it was his first time seeing the emperor. This emperor was Arak Bakatos, and he stated that he held Asher's achievements in high regard. "Your words are too kind," Asher replied. As per Arak, Asher seems to be the only one he can trust now. He sighed as he informed Asher that the so-called heroes were falling and disappearing one by one. He declared to reward Asher for saving their empire, as also his token of gratitude and trust. He then calls the guards who bring the reward. 3 guards walked forward to the carpet with a huge black case. The guards positioned in front of Asher, and Asher hears Arak stating that Asher seemed to be the perfect owner of the item inside the case. Asher was staring at the case, waiting to see what's inside. A bright light appeared the moment the box opened. After having a discussion with Arak, Asher leaves the hall. While walking, Insur asked Asher what exactly the Emperor gave to him. Asher then replied that it was the Empire's box, a rare weapon passed down from the former Emperor. Asher heard rumors about the box, but this was the first time he learned what kind of weapon it was. Wow, he gave you something that valuable? You don't have to use it right away, Insur stated. Leica came together with Cain, so Asher didn't respond to Insur. Leica was smiling, asking Asher if he really met the Emperor. She was so impressed by Asher that he met someone that others couldn't even approach. Asher smiled back at her, but his voice was serious while calling her name, which also made the lady serious. He told Leica that there was something he needed to say. The next day, he gathered Leica, Cain, and Erina outside and informed them that he needed to leave. He promised them he would come to see them again. It's just that he doesn't have any idea when. He asked Leica to focus on her studies, and he seriously added that there was something he must do. He recalled the time he stabbed Crocus when he heard someone saying, "See you again, the unchanging one." Asher wants to take care of everything that irritates him. Leica tapped his shoulder and said, "Don't die wherever you go, Asher." Asher replied understood. He then looked at Erina as he wanted to tell her it was nice meeting her. In the end, he just thanked Erina and Cain for everything they had done so far. Cain then told him to take good care along the way, while Erina didn't give any words. Asher then walked away, and while leaving, Leica confidently said that nothing bad would happen to him knowing that he was strong. The lady was very confident, telling Erina and Cain that Asher would surely survive wherever he goes. Still, Erina was silent since there was something in her mind. It turned out that it was familiar with how Asher bids goodbye. The captain of the guards back then, which was Asher now, always told Erina that he would be back every time he left. He also informed Erina that he might be a little late, so he wants her to lock the doors well and take care of the house. The image of the captain of the guards, her adoptive father, heading to the battlefield as if it were nothing was also the same view while she was staring at Asher leaving them. Meanwhile, Asher reached the forest almost near the Empire. Insur asked him where his destination, and he replied that his first destination was the Kingdom of Rabia, a place ruled by his former comrade. He was checking the map. He rolled it while stating that he heard the kingdom had fallen according to the information he got. Surprisingly, Tarkin shows up. He was standing bravely with his spear, and he was clenching his fist with a serious look. "Looks like you're free now, Tarkin," Asher said with crossed arms. Tarkin then replied, "Yeah. Thankfully, you kept your promise." He smiled and promised to never forget Asher. He pointed his spear at Asher while claiming that he would definitely come back to Asher someday and fight once more. He believes that when that time comes, he will surely defeat him. Asher still crossed his arms as he replied, "I'll be waiting." Tarkin smiled at him for the last time and highly jumped away while saying, "See you again." Asher was watching Tarkin leaving. Insur reminded him that monsters are also enemies of humans, so he asked if it was okay to let Tarkin go easily. Asher then replied that Tarkin had promised him not to harm humans, and he believed it. Asher then continues walking. Insur stated that Tarkin is an interesting guy for calling himself a warrior and talking about mastery. Right now, a guy was watching Asher. This guy was sitting on the branch of a tree. For him, Asher was a mysterious kid. It turned out he had been digging into Asher's background. He figured out that Asher was the adopted son of Lebarak, just a troublemaker causing all sorts of problems, but suddenly transformed into a master of swordsmanship overnight, including the admiration of a young lady, Leica, and was even acknowledged as a disciple by a swordmaster. Achieved great feats, defeating assassins, demons, and even monsters. For this guy, Asher's story is hard to believe. He was confused if it is possible for a person to change so much in a short span of time. This guy has been very suspicious of Asher from the start. He grabbed the Empire's history book to look for something. He was aware that Asher was searching for the whereabouts of heroes and warriors ever since he chanted strange incantations. He has always been curious about Asher's true identity. Then he found some interesting information in the book he was holding. It was the information of the captain of the Empire's guard. The night came. Asher was roasting in the forest. Insur suddenly asked him about what kind of place is the Gravia kingdom. According to Asher, it was a kingdom ruled by a grand mage. Insur then concludes that Asher was referring to the guy who made his gauntlet. It was the Grand Mage, a hero who protected the world with transcended magic. After a war, the Grand Mage received land from the Emperor and founded and ruled the kingdom of Ravia. It was a kingdom more brilliant and splendid than anywhere else, a place called Paradise on Earth. But Asher heard the kingdom fell, and the Grand Mage disappeared. Insur then concludes that the Grand Mage might have fallen like the ruler of the Abyss. Asher then replied that nobody knew, and they couldn't say for sure right now. While talking, they were unaware that there were two people watching him. It turned out to be assassins. Asher stated that they would have to go to the kingdom of Rabia to fight it out themselves. The two assassins jumped toward him with swords, but Asher immediately felt it and instantly summoned a sword. He then attacked the assassins before they could attack him. The assassins dropped to the ground, while Asher deduces that these guys followed them all the way in this forest. He was aware that these assassins were members of the Motorola Guild. Insur asked if these people were the ones he was referring to before, and he replied yes, and added that these were followers of Mariana. Asher heard more people coming. It was another 3 assassins, and the guy in the middle said, as expected, they're not easy prey. They say you even defeated the banquet's host, little imperial swordsmanship brat. Unfortunately, more numerous assassins appeared. Their leader commanded Asher to give up and quietly offer his life to their lord Mariana. Asher then calmly replied that he was planning to track down Mariana, so he asked the assassins to take him where their fake god was. The leader was annoyed at Asher's braveness. He accused Asher of insulting their lord, so he pulled a sword and commanded his men to kill Asher immediately. Several of the assassins charged toward Asher. Asher's aura was different. He fights back and mercilessly stabbed the assassins. 6 assassins jumped toward him at once. Asher angrily told them to stop bothering him and get lost. He attacked them with his sword, and none of the 6 assassins got near to him. The remaining assassins stare at him. He walked toward them and ordered them to bring Mariana if they didn't want to get hurt. Unfortunately, it seems unlikely you'll meet the great Lord Mariana. Before that, you'll die by my hand. The leader replied. This guy was surrounded by a dark aura. His aura threatened Insur, but Asher was calm since this was also the time he was waiting for. He knew that this leader of the assassins was the Motorola's swordsmanship. As of now, he can see that this guy is more refined than before. I'll finish you, the Motorola's swordsmanship uttered. But then, the enemies suddenly flew away as there was someone who interfered and attacked them. Insur was clueless, but the aura seemed to be familiar to Asher. You lowlifes blocking the road, how annoying, the guy said. It turned out it was Haiban. He was smiling at Asher and asked Asher if the Motorola's guy was attacking him. The leader of the assassins was in fear the moment he saw Haiban. Haven's eyes shine in anger while proclaiming that these assassins dared to mess with his disciple. He was about to unalive the assassin, but then Asher stopped him and told the assassin to spill where their base was so he won't die. After getting an information, Asher and Haiban then headed to the location. While walking, Haiban said that Asher haven't changed despite that it's been a while since the last time they saw each other. Haiban also asked about Leica if she's fine, and Asher replied yes, then added that the lady was enrolled in the academy. Haiban then decided to visit Leica soon since he also happened to be heading to the Empire. He was smiling as he thinks that the Emperor would be pleased if he can bring Mariana's head. Right now, Insur asked if Haiban is really a swordmaster. He was thinking for a moment as he felt strange about Haven's aura. Asher was staring at him, wondering what Insur was talking about. Meanwhile, they arrived at the base of the Motorola's guild. Haiban then uttered, so they did have a base near this first. All right, let's wipe them out all at once. He was ready to fight, however. There was a lady possessed a dark aura. She was floating above, and she welcomed both Haiban and Asher in their sanctuary. Asher knew this girl, and he was surprised that this girl is still alive. The lady landed on the ground and said, "It's been a while, Haiban." She was slowly removing her hoodie, with a smile proclaiming that Haiban surely haven't forgotten her face. "Of course, I haven't," Haven replied. He was aware that this lady is the banquet of the Motorola, Shavanath. Haiban then told her that she's still alive and haven't aged either. Shavanath then replied that it was thanks to the power of the gods. An immortal body that surpasses even a swordmaster like you. I've gained power beyond that of humans. You thought I'd leave the world like your guard captain, didn't you? Ho ho, Shavanath proclaimed. Asher was staring at her. He recalled that Shavanath is a leadership group of Motorola, guided by divine revelation, one of the seats of the banquet. In the past, Haiban and Asher received orders from the Empire to carry out a large-scale operation to wipe out Motorola. After long battles, they defeated all the banquet's members, except for one, Shavanath. Shavanath cleverly evaded them and survived persistently. When cornered, she disappeared without a trace. Asher never thought this lady would appear again like this. As per Shavanath, she don't have any business with Haiban. She pointed at Asher and added that she have a business with Asher, a little imperial swordsmanship brat. Asher prepared his sword, but Haiban stopped him and said he would deal with Shavanath. With you, Shavanath, I'll finish things today. Haiban uttered madly. He attacked Shavanath, but the lady managed to block with a smile and said, "Oh, you're going to face me? You cockroach-like creatures. You, Mariana, and the rest. I'll exterminate you all." Haiban replied and attacked the lady once more, but then Shavanath surprisingly deflected his attack. Asher and Insur witnessed how Shavanath deflected an aura-laden sword, and Insur was impressed with it. You shouldn't underestimate the power of the great divine. Ignorant fools who do not believe in the gods. Do you think you can overcome the power of the great divine? Shavanath uttered while attacking Haiban. Haiban blocked her sword, but he was struggling. Shavanath smiled at him and wished for him to die. She even calls him unbeliever, but Haiban suddenly chuckled and told the lady she's such a fanatic. Haven's eyes shines and she swung her sword, creating a strong blow that made the lady flew away and fell on the ground. Don't underestimate me, Shavanath. All you did was survived by sneaking away like a coward, and now you dare to challenge me, relying on the power of your god? Do you think a swordmaster is a joke? Haiban proclaimed. Shavanath kneeled on the ground. She smiled and teases Haiban that his era of heroes is over. Haiban felt insulted. Shavanath then added that Haiban was insignificant being for opposing the great divine and worshipping profane and wicked power. She stood and cast a dark magic and declared that Haiban will kneel before the power of the divines. The dark magic becomes strong surrounding them. Insur at this moment felt that the air has changed. Asher then replied it was Marina's resonance. That bastard, what is she scheming? Haiban uttered with annoyance. He was dumbfounded the moment he felt he was being attacked. He kneeled on the ground while holding his chest as he cannot breath. Is this divine power suppressing superhuman strength? Insur asked, but he didn't get a response as it turned out that Asher was also affected by the dark magic of Shavanath. Asher was also kneeling on the ground, catching his breath. Insur was panicking the moment he realizes that the cursed divine's power also suppresses Asher. Shavanath was standing still staring at Haiban. Haiban was mad at her, but she didn't feel any guilt, and even told Haiban it serves him right. She proclaimed that Haiban is a lowly being daring to challenge the great god. She strongly kicked Haiban, so Haiban flew away and slammed on the ground. Shavanath then approached Asher and told her to consider it a blessing to join the great Mariana. She pointed her sword at Asher and informed him she will end it in one painless blow. Asher was uttering something. Shavanath smiled and kneeled on the ground to level Asher's head. What was that? I can't hear you. Any last words, little one? She said while pulling Asher's hair. You let your guard down, Shavanath. Asher replied and attacked Shavanath with a spear. Blood splattered, and Shavanath was dumbfounded. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Till next time.